হ্যাঁ, শুরু করুন।
আচ্ছা, okay. Good morning, Shubho Shakal. On behalf of the Center for Policy Dialogue, I would like to invite you to this dialogue on proposed power and energy system master plan, perspectives on analytical frame, methodology, and influencing factors. As you know, that power and energy is very important for the development of the country. It has contribution to the economic growth through improvement in the infrastructure of the country, which is one of the main factors for moving forward. And as you know that the Ministry of Power and Energy and Mineral Resources of the government of Bangladesh has initiated the process of drafting a new power system master plan. And you know that the master plans usually estimate the demand and supply and chart out a way forward, what should be the requirement and how should be the generation of the required power and energy, and what should be the mix of the sources of energy. So that's why it is important. It is an important policy decision for the ministry, because all the power system master plans are considered as the main policy document for the development of the power sector. And it is all the more important in the context of the COVID-19, which has actually changed a few scenarios of our growth path, and also it's impacted many sectors of the economy. And that's why a long-term projection of the electricity demand is it's very important. It is a crucial target which has to be set forth in the coming master plan, and it is largely guided by in setting other demand and supply indicators, particularly the sectoral electricity demand and generation and energy mix, as I have said. And also, it is important to set the prices, to set the tariffs accordingly, and also what kind of reform measures are required to have an efficient power system in the country. So these are the issues which will be discussed in today's dialogue. And today we have a presentation also. The presentation will be presented in front of you by our research director, Dr. Khandukar Ghulam Wasim. And we are very happy that we have a number of important guests who have joined us despite their busy schedule. First of all, I would like to thank and welcome His Excellency Mr. Naoki Ito, Ambassador of the Embassy of Japan in Bangladesh, who is here with us as a special guest. We have guests of honor, Mr. Mohammad Hussein, who is the Director General, Power Cell, Power Division, Ministry of Power, Energy and Mineral Resources, Government of Bangladesh. And we have another guest of honor, Mr. Mohammad Alauddin, who is the Chairman and Additional Secretary, Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, Power Division, Ministry of Power, Energy and Mineral Resources, Government of Bangladesh. Besides that, we have a very important set of panelists who are experts on the field. We are very happy that we have Dr. M. Tamim, who is the former Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor and of the caretaker government, and Professor, Department of Petroleum and Mineral Resources Engineering, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. We have Dr. Izaz Hussain, Professor, Department of Chemical Engineering, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, BUET, and we have Professor Anu Muhammad, Department of Economics, Jahangirnagar University. We also have Professor M. Shamsul Alam, who is the Dean, Faculty of Engineering, Daffodil University, Daffodil International University. We have Mr. Imran Karim, President, Bangladesh Independent Power Products Associations, PIPA, and we have Professor Chaudhuri Mohammad Shahriar Ahmed, who is the Assistant Professor and Director, Center for Energy Research, as panelists. This session will be moderated by Professor Mustafizur Rahman, who will also chair the session. And besides our distinguished guests, we have several guests from various sectors. We have government officials, development activists, experts, academia, representatives from the development partners, and also representatives from the media. So I once again welcome you to this dialogue this morning. And with this, I would now hand over to Professor Mustafizur Rahman to go ahead with the proceedings of the session. Over to you.
Thank you, Executive Director, Dr. Fahmida Khatun. I would like to join our Executive Director in welcoming all of you to this very important virtual dialogue. As Dr. Fahmida already mentioned, this is a very important theme that we will be focusing on this morning. The Power and Energy System Master Plan is being formulated as of now. The contract has been signed, and we are at a very crucial juncture where all the estimations of demand and supply and mix will have to be designed in a way that it serves the purpose of higher economic growth, better well-being of our people in going forward in the over the medium term. And I would also like to join our Executive Director in welcoming our special guest, His Excellency the Ambassador. Since JICA is a very important player, and Japan is extending extensive support to the development of our country, and also particularly this sector. So it's very, we are very happy to welcome His Excellency Mr. Naoki Ito to this dialogue. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us. And I would also like to join our Executive Director in welcoming our two guests of honor who have always been very supportive of our initiatives, are open to discussion and being engaged in the discourse on this very important sector for our economy. We have Additional Secretary Mr. Mohammad Alauddin, Chairman, Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, SREDA, with us, and also Mr. Mohammad Hossain, Director General, Power Cell. So welcome, dear guests of honor, and thank you for your support. And we are very much also looking forward to our distinguished panelists, who we hope that will bring their insights based on the very long experience in the context of this sector in our country. We also have a number of other very distinguished participants, including the country representative of JICA, an important player here, and also other from other sections of the concerned stakeholder groups. We have with us many development partners with us this morning who are extending support to this sector and the development in Bangladesh in general. And obviously their views are also important in the context of today's discussion. We have been joined also by our friends from the media who always are very supportive of CPD activities. And we also look forward to our Facebook participants. We hope that they will stay with us in the course of this important discussion that we'll be having this morning. Those who follow CPD activities will be knowing that this is perhaps fourth time in recent past that we have been dealing with various aspects of energy sector in Bangladesh at various points in time. And Dr. Khandokar Ghulam Muazzam, our research director, has been following this sector with the eye of an investigative researcher, analyst, and a development policy maker who is contributing to this discourse in a very important way. And we also have with us our colleagues from the team here at CPD. So Dr. Muazzam will be making the presentation, and following which we will hear from our distinguished panelists, and then we will have some open discussion, and I then will bring our guests of honor and our special guest. Language is language of convenience, so please feel free to take part in any language that you would prefer. And this is also the month of our independence, and I would also like to recall the sacrifice of our martyrs, and all of what we are doing is to really fulfill their aspirations for an independent Bangladesh. So this is important from that perspective as well. And of course, this is the birth centenary of our father of the nation. So I think that our discussion is dedicated to fulfilling the aspirations that they had for Bangladesh in going forward. Dear guests, we will now get on with our presentation, which Dr. Khandokar Ghulam Muazzam, as I was mentioning, he has been following this sector for a long time, and today the focus will be particularly on the proposed power and energy system master plan, and as it is being held at a time when we can and we will be able to contribute to the discourse, because the issues are being now formulated, the designs are being now formulated, and this is an opportune and appropriate time, I think, that we discuss the critically important issues and contribute to the proposed plan as it is being formulated. So with those words, I would like to invite Dr. Khandokar Ghulam Muazzam to give his presentation. I am hoping that he can do it within about half an hour, because we would like our other panelists and guests also and participants also to take part in an active way, and Dr. Muazzam will set the ground for that discussion. Over to you, Dr. Muazzam.
Thank you, Chair. At first, I would like to thank Professor Mustafizur Rahman and Dr. Fahmida for this organizing this event, which is very timely, I would say. The title of my presentation is Proposed Power and Energy System Master Plan, Perspectives on Analytical Frame, Methodology, and Influencing Factors. I should admit at first that initially our plan is to focus only on the demand side issues. But later on, we realized that it will be rather incomplete if we do not address issues related to energy mix in this context. So rather, my presentation will be broadened, not limit within the demand issues, but also on the supply side issues, particularly on the issues highlighted in my presentation. The study that I have carried out, my study team was with me, Ms. Helen Mashiat Priyoti. She is with me here. And also special thanks to Mr. Shamim Alam Shibli and Mr. Tamim Ahmed. I will mainly focusing on the section 3, 4, and 5 to review the PSMPs on the demand side issues and energy mix issues, and like to propose some analytical frame and methodology based on the experience of other countries, and thereby like to go to the conclusion. At first, we'd like to appreciate government's initiative, particularly Minister of Power and Energy's initiative to drafting a new power and energy system master plan. Earlier one was rather mentioned as power system master plan. Here it is explicitly mentioned energy in the title, though in the earlier documents energy was also included. But here explicitly it is mentioned that energy is very, very important, and I think is important, and that's why it has been included in the title. And we appreciate that for including in the title of this new document. And this issue has been discussed over last 1 year particularly, and even we could recall that at one event at CPD, State Minister for the Power Ministry has mentioned about their initiative. And also it has been reported in the media several times over the last couple of months. And what we have came to know that government has signed an agreement with JICA, and JICA in its website mentioned that the new plan will promote a low or zero carbon transformation of the total energy supply and demand system. So we think that it is very, very important statement that made by JICA, and that has been understood by the government and the JICA. And this is also important in the context that this new policy is that there are some structural challenges and operational challenges we observe in the power sector. It is not the access issue now. It is now the efficiency issue. It is now the overcapacity issue. And it is now the financial burden issue, which need to be take due attention in the new plan. And also the COVID pandemic has created a new scenario, a new reality for the economy and for the power sector, which also need to take into cognizance. So from that point of view, this policy, the document will help a lot to address those issues that we believe. But what we noticed in the successive PSMPs is that the weak demand side analysis have been criticized. Because of weak benchmark, over projection on long-term economic growth or per capita income, and also the lack of methodological rigor. Those are some of the limitations that have been mentioned by different academia. So we think that it is very, very important to have a rigorous demand side analysis, and that we expect in the new PSMP that will be formulated over a year. And this has also created burden on different accounts. It has created excess reserve capacity because of inefficient use of public fund, additional spending for foreign exchanges for importing fossil fuels, and inefficient use of power plants, and excess payment of different charges to power producers. These have created an increasing burden to the BPDB. So these are, we think, is very, very important to take into account while the new policy and the plan will be drafted. So our presentation will provide some suggestions on analytical frame, factors, and methodology based on the review that we do on demand side and the supply side issues, and also the methodologies that we use in other countries. We did it based on secondary data and some key informing interviews with a number of eminent academics, some of whom are already present in this discussion as well, and also discussion with the professionals. Regarding the network of Bangladesh Power, I will not mention many things about it. What we like to mention is that because of government's bold initiative, the contribution of the power sector in the GDP has over time increased. So we appreciate government's initiative for ensuring access to electricity to all people, and that has created increasing contribution to GDP by the power sector. And their generation has increased to 71,419 gigawatt hour, but it is mostly dependent on the fossil fuel, particularly natural gas, and 71%, then the furnace oil, and partly on coal. And at the same time, we have the problem of excess capacity. We all know about it, and this has increased to as much as 69% sometime in 2020, when the COVID was badly affected the country and the economy. But it has gradually decreased to 38%. And here are the graphs. In the blue graphs, you can easily understand that how the excess capacity has been down and again gone up over time. And over time, we also noticed that transmission-related investments is increasing, though not as per the expectation. And during 2020, the transmission line length has increased by 5%. And the same is for the grid substation increase. And also in the distribution point of view, it has also increased over the years. Because of various initiatives, system loss has declined to 9%, and without bulk consumer, it has declined to 7%, but there are scopes for further reduction of the system loss within the country. But what we have noticed in the earlier PSMPs, particularly on the demand side issues, our major observation is that in case of estimating the demands, the GDP growth rate was considered to be the main variable. We appreciate that, because GDP is the main variable in most of other countries' the demand estimate. But what we have also noticed is that it is only the GDP growth, not many other variables that are considered for this estimation. That is the, we would say, a weaker part of this estimation. For example, in 2005 PSMP, GDP and historical electricity consumption data has considered for forecasting. For PSMP 10, GDP per capita data, as well as electricity consumption and maximum load data was used. And PSMP 16 has used the elasticity of the GDP system. So these are the technical methods, or the technical equations that has been used for GDP estimate used in 2005, 10, and 16. I will not actually elaborate it because of considering time. And there are some comparative assessment of PSMP 5, 10, and 16, how different variables are considered in different years. But what is important to discuss here is that while the revision happen every time, we notice that it is the base year load, the base case scenario, that has always been considered. Either it is in case of the PSMP 5 or 10 and 16, and in each of the revision, the base case scenario has been considered, and that has revised downward in the successive PSNPs. So that has, we noticed, is always been considered. Not so much of happening that the target has exceed the base case scenario and reach towards the high case level. That didn't actually happen here. But what is also interesting to note that the forecasted demand and maximum demand served has been narrowed down. And if you see the column, the left side column, where the numbers have shown in red colors, you will see over time the gap has reduced from 38% to only 4% from 2011 to 2020. Does that has actually a question. Does that mean that the existing demand has been by and large fulfilled by the generation? So that if that is so, then it has not required much of an additional generation capacity. Only to include the incremental one will fulfill the requirement of the electricity in the country. That is a point that we are not fully understood. Why the gap has narrowed down only to 4%, meaning that the BPDB is actually now purposing almost all the 96% of the demands within the country. Is it so? We are actually observing that there are lots of demands of electricity, but how to explain that is not fully clear to us. That is one aspect. And the right-hand side column with the red color, you notice that installed capacity and the projected demand, the gap has been widening over the years, from 32% to 37%. Here the data we have shown here. Though the reserve capacity has been mentioned by 25%, although it is considered to be very high compared to the other developing countries where 10% reserve capacity has been considered, here we are actually now found that a 37% of reserve capacity has been created. That also indicate that there is a gap between the policy and operation. That we are actually creating the generation installed capacity at a level which is much higher compared to what we are actually demanded within the economy. That we need to have a bit clear idea. what is more interesting to present here, that we like to project for the next 5 years how much excess capacity could be created if the existing demand flow, as it is mentioned in the PSMP 16, is continuing, and if the existing plans which are currently being implemented is being implemented by 2025. And we noticed that there will still prevail a high excess capacity, and it will be around 31% by the end of 2025. So we need to take this in due consideration, that if the existing plan continues, then it will also create a high excess capacity within the economy, and that will continue. Even we have estimated and found very strangely that even at this moment, any no power plant is added, existing generation capacity can meet the demand till mid of 2023. So you can easily understand that there is already a huge demand unmet. Now, huge supply still there, which is not being actually fully utilized. So that is an important thing that we like to take into due consideration by the BPTB while the master plan will be formulated in the coming months. And there are some other limitations we would like to mention. For example, the longer-term demand projection. Our understanding is that, does it actually necessary? Our understanding that since in every 5 years we are actually reviewing it, that can easily accommodate the current and the midterm demands of the economy. So rather a long-term 20 years demand creates some confusion about the initiatives to be taken by the ministry or by the department, or including by the private sector. Why? This is because that it may have some sorts of creating a justification that this amount of excess electricity will be needed. For example, by 2041, according to 2016, the capacity need to be increased to 60,000 megawatt worth of electricity. But that doesn't mean that we need that capacity now. But there is a tendency to justify that capacity to be created now, and I would say there may have a political economy dimension in this context. So I like to take this in due consideration to you. Second is that the variable use for demand estimate. I already mentioned that GDP is being used, but other factors are also need to be taken into consideration. That is the second point. The third point is that our GDP, Bangladesh GDP, is largely led by service sector. And if the service sector is actually consuming less electricity, but if the similar weight put to the electricity demand estimate as it has been put in the GDP estimate by the service sector, then it will rather create a upper bias within the estimate that we are like to take into account. Here is the table. Service sector contributing 50% of the incremental GDP. So if we are actually considering providing the same weightage to the demand of electricity by the service sector, that will be creating a upper bias within the estimate. That is an important thing to mention here. Then it is the GDP growth rate. There is a number of scholars have several times raised that whether economy is actually really growing at such a rate or not. So if that excess GDP growth rate or the international organizations that actually projecting the GDP growth rate is compared with the national rates, that also create a upper bias in the estimates of the power sector demand. And since we don't have sectoral estimates and sectoral informations on electricity demands and the GDP, often there is a tendency to have a long wish list provided from the different quarters, and there is a pressure from different quarters to include those in the demand estimate of electricity, and that also create a bias estimate of the electricity. So we also need to have a very pragmatic, and we expect that this new estimate will take that into consideration. Then the sectoral approach is also need to be taken into due consideration. and the limitations of the data. I admit that for Bangladesh, the GDP and some other variables are available from the secondary level and the public data, but we also need to take into account that other data are also needed, and those data are not available. Maybe that is one of the limitations that is struggling by the BPDB to create a more extensive analysis of power demand, but we couldn't actually ignore the demand of the data of various kinds of variables that also need to be taken into account. And often there is no dedicated wing for data collection within the BPDB and the ministry, which also I think need to be strengthened. And we are happy that under the new plan, the new activity that the JICA is considering, this new data will also be it will be strengthened. The data system will also be strengthened. That has been mentioned there. Now I move to the energy mix related issues under the PSMPs, where we have noticed that it is overwhelmingly fossil fuel based, and largely if you notice the PSMP 5, 10 and 16, initially it was on gas based, later it was shifted to coal based, and finally it has rather mixed to gas, coal and liquid fuel. But what is happening in reality is that natural gas always lead the energy mix in the country. While the natural gas has been depleting, it has the government and the BPDB has gradually shifted to other sources, for example, crude oil, and finally on LNG. That is also there. For the coal use point of view, it is a widely discussed issue as an energy mix, and there are lots of plans government earlier formulated but didn't actually realize much. But what we recently heard from the government that it will scrap all coal power plants except 3. 12 are currently in different level of operation, but actually 23 are in planning. So if those 23 except the 3 are currently being implemented or being scrapped, that will be a welcome initiative in the context of reducing the fossil fuel use in energy and power generation. Regarding the renewable energy issue, there is not so much progress we have observed. You also knew it well. And there are targets in the PSMP 16 that 10% of the total installed capacity will be from the renewable energy by 2020. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And also hydropower potential projects have been identified, but that also didn't actually realize much. But one thing that always found that cost of fuel is a determining factor for using as an energy mix. But what we noticed here in this comparative table, you will see that often we are not always actually taking that into account. Often we are using expensive furnace oil or diesel for generating electricity, even though we have excess reserve capacity in hand. Though we are not using the coal. Even now the government is actually pushing towards LNG, but LNG is also, the price is very, very volatile, and the price level is also very high. So, even the cost point of view, the justification is not fully there. What is also, in general, we notice that this fuel mix is also considered to be happen on an ad hoc basis. If you see the 2016 and the 2020 data, the low-case scenario was targeted for liquid fuel to be used by 30%, but actually it was used 21%. While in case of 2020, the gas was targeted to be reduced to 50%, but it was actually used to 72%. And the liquid fuel was targeted to 36%, and thanks that it was reducedly used to 14%. So the plan and the reality has a much more difference, and it has happened. We are not fully sure that on what basis this energy mix is always been happening in terms of power generation. And also the imported liquid fuel is been increasing in the country, and that also created a debt, both domestic and external debt within the country. What is also important to mention here is that there is lack of comprehensive plan for energy and the power sector. While the generation has focused a lot, but there is not adequate attention provided in the earlier PSMPs on transmission and distribution. We would like to thank the government that in recent years a substantial investment is happening on improvement and on the transmission system and a strengthening of the distribution system. But still there are cases that electricity load shedding is still a major concern, not only in outside the capital city, even within the capital city, load shedding is happening off and on. Then some expert, while we discuss with them, have mentioned that earlier country had pillars but no power, but at this moment country had power but no pillar. So we have to come out from this situation by creating a balanced development and the transmission and the distribution system along with that of generation, which is very, very important. And also there are problems here of lengthy transmission system. While the generation is happening in one place, but it needs to be transmitted to a longer part and other part, which is always found to be costly. So they need to have a comprehensive plan where the industries to be established, special economic zones and other industries will be established, and the generation plants will be nearby. Or if it is renewable, it could be generated within the industries as well. So that are very, very important. Even because of the poor transmission distribution, industries are still relying on captive power. And government is now actually pushing industries to come back to the government sources, transmission and distribution, but still industries are not fully keeping that reliance. I think it is a very, very important step, and we are expecting that this PSMP will focus on that, on transmission and the distribution system, so that reliance on T&D will be ensured, and the industries will use the public sector transmission and the distribution system for their industries. What we also notice here is that renewable energy point of view, there is a poor record of implementation. And out of 36 projects, only 8 have been implemented. And others are not in full swing. Even STREDA's authority need to be improved. And STREDA need not only to be signed small-scale power, renewable plants, they should be strengthened and given the authority to sign the large-scale power plants with other technical and financial capacity within STREDA. That is also important. Load management is still a major concern. How to balance the load is also an important issue in case of Bangladesh. And also the limited use of energy-efficient equipment. Often consumers consider energy-efficient technology expensive, and they do not like to use that. But people need to be aware, since Bangladesh is becoming a lower middle-income country and has become lower middle-income country as becoming a developing country in the future. So it need to use the energy-efficient technologies more in the coming years. In case of the tariff rate, we think that a transparent and efficient system is required, though it is under the administered system, but still consumers also need to take the burden of excess cost and additional costs that should not be burdened by the consumers is happening here. So that also need to be taken into account. And also consumers are taking the burden of fossil fuel-based power generation instead of clean energy. So consumers need to be aware of these things. Even the energy cost will be increasing, and government also may need to reduce the subsidy amount in the coming days. So it is also an important thing to take into account, that how the additional costs to be accommodated and how the consumers will be paid, and how the power sector will be more efficient to reduce the overall generation cost and thereby provide electricity at an affordable price. Now I briefly mention about the power demand methodologies used in different countries and in general. It is found that two types of approach is being applied globally. One is top-down approach, where it is aggregate level estimation is considered, and that has been disaggregated at a sectoral level. And for that, I think detailed data are required to do that. And there is another approach is called the bottom-up approach, where the detailed data or the detailed consumption data of the sectoral level or at household level will be accumulated, and thereby it goes to the aggregate final estimate. We hope that this year JICA and their team and the BPDB will consider this bottom-up approach so that micro-level energy consumption, electricity consumption will be duly considered and will be calculated properly so that there is no case of over-generation or that unreliable demand will take place in the coming years. And there are various methods, which is called autoregressive method, autoregressive moving average method, integrated moving aggregate method. These are various kinds of artificial neural network methods. These methods are also used. And since the economy is growing, a linear relationship between GDP growth and electricity consumption will be no longer valid in the coming days for Bangladesh. It will be much more of a complicated nature of economy where different kinds of variables need to be considered, and non-linear kinds of estimate will be needed to consider in terms of that estimate. And we have noticed different countries have applied different methods. Paraguay used OLS method, but extensively used different variables. Different developing countries consider price, income, urbanization, seasonal factors while they estimate it. China consider historical data and weather and temperature issues. It is also mentioned that the load data issues are also in different countries. Pakistan used household data, street light, commercial and industrial agriculture data use. Thailand used population data also. Philippines used different consumer level data for their estimation. Malaysia used load data and seasonal pattern. Brazil used electricity consumption by process, value added by different sectors, price, electricity price, production and the value addition issues, and this and that. So what we like to mention here that, I need another 4 or 5 minutes. What we like to mention here is that there are already alternate methods available and which are widely used globally. And what we appreciate that this time, while the BPDB will work with the JICA, they will focus on a very suitable, appropriate method. And what we understand that definitely we need additional data for any kinds of updated modern techniques to be used. But for that, if necessary, they will conduct survey within a short period of time to collect those data and use it for the analysis. In case of the renewable energy related energy mix, a number of countries are taking various kinds of initiatives. India has a separate ministry of new and renewable energy, and they are targeting ambitiously, and they have setting targets for each of the states to increase their renewable energy use. They are providing support to R&D. Off-grid and rooftop systems are being encouraged there. UK is actually established a financial framework for encouraging renewable energy here. Germany is also targeting to increase it from 65% by 2030 to 95% by 2050, and they are especially looking into the special feed-in tariff for electricity generation renewable sources. Now I am actually coming to my last final slides on conclusion. Well, what we have actually noticed in terms of the analysis of the earlier PSMPs and experience of other countries is that we like to appreciate government's initiative for drafting this new power and energy system master plan. We hope that this will be realized soon. And this is also important at a time of energy transition. And at the same time, a number of emerging challenges for the economy as well as for the power sector. We hope that this new power and energy system master plan will address those challenges. And JICA has agreed to work with the ministries also taking their earlier initiative. They are actually taking a proactive stance in this case. What they mentioned in their statement is that they will strengthen the capacity within the government to carry out these kinds of analysis independently. So we appreciate that stance. I hope that capacity will be generated within the thing. But what we also like to know about the terms of reference, how the zero carbon emission initiatives will be finally being realized and how they will cater to that. And we like to know it more clearly in the coming days. In the earlier PSMPs, we have noticed various kinds of limitations, both in the terms of demand side as well as and the fossil mix point of view. And I already mentioned those, and we think that those will be taken into due consideration. In case of actually considering the new plan preparation, we think that there are different initiatives are there, different approaches are there, but within that, the government will take the bottom-up approach for implementing it. So the new plan, New Power and Energy System Master Plan, according to CPD, should be drafted based on 4 principles. First, it is to be applied advanced method for estimating the demand forecast. That is our should be the first principle. Second is that it should take into account the limitations and weaknesses of earlier methods and the earlier estimates that are being done, and the review that has been found there. And the third one is that it should aim to reduce excess installed capacity in a phased manner. And the fourth one is that it should ensure due importance in transitioning towards clean power. So these are the 4 principles we think should take due consideration while this new plan will be drafted. And in case of the Bangladesh, the bottom-up approach for micro predictions to be considered. And there are data limitations we understand, and necessary survey should be conducted for that, and BBS could extend that support to the BPDB for that. And data management is a very, very important issue that I think will be needed to be institutionalized within BPDB or within the ministry. And there are, we expect that the new plan will specifically mention required installed capacity. It is often vaguely mentioned there, but we expect that it will be mentioned clearly by installed capacity, and should also indicate how the excess capacity will be phased out. Particularly how the gradually the energy mix will be balanced by increasing the renewable energy. This should be one of the focus we expect. And also we like to consider under the new PSMP that revised margin should be downward revised. It should not be 25%. We think that other countries consider 10%, and we have done the analysis. We think that this kinds of high reserve margin is not required, and it should be revised downwards. In case of reducing the huge excess capacity, installed capacity, it should go in a phased manner. First is that phasing out the investment in power generation in fossil fuel-based power plants. Second one is that strictly mention about no extension of the quick renter power plants. Third one is that strictly mention about the discontinuation of the plants which are dated, inefficient, and using expensive energy. And the fourth one is that strictly take its stance on that LNG-based power plants will not be set up in the land where the coal-based power plants are scrapped. And government should take a go-slow stance for new investment in generation, rather should focus on transmission and distribution more, and should take a bold stance on clean energy part. SHEDA should be strengthened, and priority should be given to competitive-based power tariff from the administrative-based power tariff, but should take due protection to the target groups. And and we also think that under the PSMP, it should be mentioned that the speedy supply and power generation and the Energy Act need to be repealed quickly, as quick as possible. This is my final slide. What I like to mention here is that a dedicated monitoring team is required, and where it should ensure that the demands and the required things are done as per the plan. It should focus on the green and sustainable energy. Particularly, I would like to mention here is that as a mechanism, it was mentioned by Committee for Development Policy (CDP) that Bangladesh should take due consideration on ensuring green and sustainable energy as part of its preparation for a smooth LDC graduation. So I think government will take that into account, and this policy document will highlight that in that part. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying is that PSMP should show a clear path towards energy transformation, where it will focus on opportunities on generation of renewable energy to effectively address the existing climate emergency issues, as well as the Paris Accord that country has committed under the revised NDC. So with these words, I like to conclude. And before my conclusion, I like to mention my concluding part in Bangla so that the media colleagues could take the points more clearly. My point here is that সরকারের পক্ষ থেকে যে উদ্যোগ নেওয়া হয়েছে এই নতুন বিদ্যুৎ এবং জ্বালানি মহাপরিকল্পনা করবার, সেটাকে আমরা সাধুবাদ জানাই, এটাকে অভিনন্দন জানাচ্ছি। এবং এটি দরকার ছিল এ কারণেই, যেহেতু এই মুহূর্তে বাংলাদেশ একটি জ্বালানির ক্ষেত্রে একটি ট্রানজিশনাল ফেজের ভিতরে রয়েছে এবং বিভিন্ন রকমের তার চ্যালেঞ্জ যাচ্ছে, সুতরাং এটি করবার খুবই দরকার ছিল। আমরা জাইকার উদ্যোগকে সাধুবাদ জানাই এবং আমরা আশা করি যে তারা আমাদের ক্যাপাসিটি ডেভেলপমেন্টে যেমন সাহায্য করবে, কিন্তু একই সাথে আমরা যেটা মনে করি যে জিরো কার্বন ইমিশনে তারা কি উদ্যোগ নিতে চায় সেটি আমরা জানতে চাই, পার্টিকুলারলি কী ধরনের টার্মস অফ রেফারেন্স জাইকা রাখছে জিরো কার্বন ইমিশনের ক্ষেত্রে, দ্যাট ইজ আমরা জানার ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের আগ্রহ রয়েছে। আমরা মনে করি যে পিএসএমপির ক্ষেত্রে যে বিভিন্ন ধরনের সীমাবদ্ধতাগুলো দেখা গেছে আগে, স্বল্প সংখ্যক সূচক ব্যবহার করে কাজ করা, পার্টিকুলারলি জিডিপি ব্যবহার করে হিসেব করা, সেখান থেকে বেরিয়ে আসা দরকার। এবং আমাদের দীর্ঘমেয়াদী আসলে পরিকল্পনার চেয়ে আমাদের এখন স্বল্প মধ্যমেয়াদী পরিকল্পনা দরকার। 5 বছরের পরিকল্পনা হলেই আসলে হতে পারে। আমাদের লং লিস্ট, যেগুলো উইশ লিস্ট অনেক সময় গভর্নমেন্টের কাছ থেকে চাপ দেওয়া হয় মিনিস্ট্রিকে, সেই জায়গাগুলোকেও আমাদের এখানে কনসিডার করার বিষয় রয়েছে। আমরা মনে করি যে ফসিল ফুয়েল থেকে সরে আসার দরকার রয়েছে, কিন্তু সেখানে যে সমস্ত সীমাবদ্ধতা রয়েছে সেই সীমাবদ্ধতাগুলোর দিকে তাকানো দরকার। বিশেষ করে যে ধরনের আর্থিক দায়ের মধ্যে পড়ে যাচ্ছে বিপিডিবি বা মিনিস্ট্রি, সেই জায়গা থেকে কিন্তু বেরিয়ে আসা দরকার রয়েছে এবং যে এক্সেস ক্যাপাসিটি হয়েছে সেটি আসলে কমিয়ে আনার দরকার রয়েছে ফেজ ম্যানার সেটি। এদিক থেকে বিভিন্ন দেশ বিভিন্ন ধরনের মেথড ব্যবহার করে, টপ ডাউন মেথড, বটম আপ মেথড, এগুলো ব্যবহার করে। আমরা মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশের জন্য যেটি সুবিধাজনক এবং যেটি অ্যাডভান্সড উন্নত, এরকম একটি মেথড সরকার ব্যবহার করবে নতুন ধরনের তথ্য উপাত্ত নিয়ে। তথ্য উপাত্তের ক্ষেত্রে ঘাটতি রয়েছে, সেটির জন্য যদি নতুন করে জরিপ চালানো দরকার হয় বিবিএসের মাধ্যমে অথবা বেসরকারি খাতের প্রতিষ্ঠানের মাধ্যমেও বিপিডিবি জরিপ চালিয়ে তথ্য উপাত্ত নিয়ে যাতে ওরকম একটি কাজ করার উদ্যোগ নেয়, সেটি আমরা মনে করি। তবে যেটি আমরা মনে করি যে 4টি প্রিন্সিপালের ভিত্তিতে নতুন পরিকল্পনা করবার দরকার রয়েছে। প্রথম হওয়া উচিত যে একটি অবশ্যই প্রাগ্রসর মেথড ব্যবহার করা। দ্বিতীয়ত হচ্ছে আগের পরিকল্পনাতে যেগুলো সীমাবদ্ধতা ছিল সেগুলো থেকে দূর করা। তৃতীয়ত হলো যে এক্সেস ক্যাপাসিটি আছে সেটাকে কিভাবে ধাপে ধাপে কমিয়ে আনা যায় তার একটি দিক নির্দেশনা থাকা। এবং চতুর্থত হলো কিভাবে আমরা ক্লিন এনার্জির দিকে, ক্লিন পাওয়ারের দিকে যেতে পারি, সেই লক্ষ্যে আমাদের কাজ করা। এই বিষয়গুলোর দিকে আগামী দিনে নজর দেওয়ার প্রয়োজন রয়েছে। এবং এটির জন্য আমরা যেটি মনে করি যে ফসিল ফুয়েলের ইনভেস্টমেন্ট থেকে গ্র্যাজুয়ালি কমিয়ে আনা, কুইক রেন্টালগুলো থেকে যে সময়ে দেয়া আছে বাধা, তারপরে এটিকে না বাড়ানো। তৃতীয়ত হলো যেগুলো প্ল্যান পুরনো হয়ে গেছে, অদক্ষ এবং উচ্চ মূল্যের জ্বালানি ব্যবহার করে, সেগুলো থেকে বেরিয়ে আসা। এবং এলএনজি বেসড পাওয়ার প্ল্যান্টসগুলো, কোল বেসড পাওয়ার প্ল্যান্টসের জায়গাগুলোতে এলএনজি না করে রিনিউয়েবল করবার সুযোগ করে দেয়া, এই ধরনের বিষয়গুলোর দিকে আমরা নজর রাখবার জন্য অনুরোধ করছি। আমার বক্তব্য শুনবার জন্য আপনাদেরকে বিশেষভাবে ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি।
Thank you, Dr. Muazzam, for that very comprehensive presentation. I think that Dr. Muazzam has drawn our attention to a number of issues which will be important from the perspective of formulating our PESMP, and he has given emphasis on particularly demand estimation, and he has questioned the current methodology and also shared with us the cross-country experiences. So we will have a discussion on that. He has observed that the difference between forecasted demand and the maximum demand has narrowed down over time. At the same time, the difference between installed capacity and projected demand has widened. So this, of course, is also associated with the investments that we are making, the costs that we are incurring, and ultimately it also impinges on the consumer prices. We have to remember that at the center of all these is the consumer and the entrepreneurs and producers, and so he has also drawn our attention to the issues of pricing and also efficiency in energy production and energy use. One important aspect that he has mentioned is the problem with sequencing, meaning that we are producing, but distribution and optimum distribution and transmission remains a major challenge in the context of Bangladesh. So I think that these will also come under discussion. As we have mentioned, we have a number of distinguished panelists who will be joining us this morning. Okay. Yeah. I would now like to bring in Mr. Imran Karim, President, Bangladesh Independent Power Producers Association. As a private sector participant, obviously Mr. Karim's perspectives will be very important, because private sector is a major stakeholder in the whole discourse that we are having. So what is their perspective on the next plan that is being formulated? How do they see their role also in terms of implementing the medium-term plan? So, Mr. Karim, your 7 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful presentation by Mr. Mazen. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. And, it has been so comprehensive that it leaves very little room for any additional supplementation. But still, I will make a few efforts that I feel that may have been missed out, and then perhaps add the private sector's view towards the power generation, power transmission, and power distribution as a whole. While we think about the new master plan, and of course, at the end of the day, we all want to achieve the best efficiency, as in spend the least amount of money for the highest amount of power derived. From the private sector's perspective, there are two elements which constitute the tariff. One is the capacity element, and second is the energy payment. In all cases, the energy payment is around 70% or more of the entire tariff. In the case of HFO, it's probably around 80%. In the case of gas, it's around 65%. In the case of and in the case of coal, it may be a little less. So on average, it's about 70%. So it is very important, I feel, that the government should have certain degree of capacity where it allows it to toggle between fuels. As in, if you take the experience of LNG prices in the last couple of months, where the LNG prices were almost at $18 per MMBTU, and at the relevant time, the HFO prices were around $7 to $8 per MMBTU. Now, for whatever reason, the gas did not reach the grid. I think financially it was a boon for us, because we had, in the short term, we had used our liquid fuel-based capacity to meet up this demand. Had we have used the gas-based capacity, then the country would have needed to spend a little bit more money. So, and since we are gradually going towards an import fuel-based power generation system, particularly in the element of fossil fuel-based, we have to have certain degree of capacity where it allows us to toggle between fuel. Otherwise, we will be left within a particular pre-designed threshold of power capacity based such on coal, gas, and liquid fuel, and whatever it may be. We lose the ability to toggle between fuel based on the available prices of fuel. As I've also previously mentioned, the prices of fuel is perhaps the most determining criteria in the overall tariff of power. That being one. So that means essentially that even though we consider, if you take regional reserve benchmarks, like say India or other places where most of the power is generated in terms of fossil fuel from their own resources, that being coal. In the case of Bangladesh, that would perhaps not be in the immediate midterm as well. So our reserve capacity may need to be a little bit more. However, it may not need to be where it is today, but it perhaps will not never meet the regional benchmarks of other countries that we may see. Another thing that perhaps need to be assessed is that while cross-country power purchase is a non-common phenomenon throughout the world, it is going to happen, and we encourage that. We feel that this provides certain degree of security and stability in the overall power supply to the country. But we feel that whenever such a contract with any external countries is signed, cost to the company as we do it, or cost to the country to the relevant substation where the power is actually reached, is that overall cost is taken into consideration, not only the cost of power purchase at the border. So like whenever we generate power, in the case of IPP power projects, our consideration of price is including the reaching of the power to the relevant substation. So that would be a benchmark. I mean, an apple-to-apple comparison. So that we can, whenever at the end of the day, like I said, everything is based on cost efficiency, and I'm sure we all want that. And if there is a situation where your locally produced power could have been cheaper than your imported power, I believe the locally produced power should be patronized. So, of course, that is an inherent motive of me because I represent that group. But we feel that to be fair, it has to be the cost to the country has to be assessed to the relevant substation where it is uploaded from the border. We also feel that one of the benefits of introducing private sector into the power generation scheme overall should be to perhaps bring forward the efficiency of power generation of the private sector in the public sector as well. So relevant benchmarking that is prevailing in the private sector in terms of fixed tariff, whatever be, should also be there in the public sector power plants. What do I mean by that? Say in the case of any private power plant, let's assume an HFO-based power plant, the tariff may be fixed at say 8 taka per kilowatt hour. The same threshold should be applied for any public sector power plant. Otherwise, it's just not efficient. I mean, whether or not the government is paying capacity payment or long-term payments to debt providers or not, there is an element of payment that is fixed, be it capacity or its own obligation of paying long-term payments to its debt providers. So overall, that threshold must be maintained. Today, even in the public sector IPPs, it's on a cost-plus basis, as in whatever the cost that the company accrues in the process of generating power will be supported in full from the government. That is not, I feel that perhaps is not the most efficient way of approaching this. As Mr. Mozam has correctly identified, that we need to find out different methods of rationalizing or perhaps staging the rental power plants and taking them out of commission. The same approach needs to be taken for captive-based power plants as well, which are currently in various mills and factories. Today, we generate about 3,000 to 3,500 megawatts of power based on imported gas now. We also have imported gas today in our grid. Now, if we are providing subsidy on these, on the gas in the captive power plant, that may be a government decision. That's a strategy call the government takes to keep its products low to its consumers or for the export market. However, the efficiency expected of the state power plants cannot be any different from what is prevailing in the larger power plants. And that can be achieved through various degrees of utilization of the heat that is getting out of the exhaust system of the state power plants. Even a 3 megawatt power plant or 4 megawatt power plant, utilizing the heat that is coming out of its exhaust can generate I think about 65% thermal efficiency. I may give a very crude example that say in many cement manufacturing plants there are power plants that is catering to its the direct need, but there is also an element of drying that is needed of the raw material. The said drying for the said manufacturing unit could have been done by using the exhaust of the power plant instead of using additional gas. Now, when you are providing subsidized gas to any manufacturer of any sort, that is fine. That's a strategic government call. However, if that particular manufacturer is not using that imported gas at the highest degree of efficiency possible, that's national loss. So I feel that when these are relevant elements, that this particular element also needs to be added. I mean, I'm not against captive power plants. I'm also a manufacturer of various products myself. But I feel that a threshold be applied that the thermal efficiency of such and such needs to be achieved when a captive power may be issued to any manufacturer or any private party. I vociferously support the conversion of coal to energy that has been suggested in Mr. Moazam's presentation. I've always felt that coal, perhaps given the limitation of land in the country, in our country, even though it may attribute cheap cost in the short term, is never cheap for us actually in the long term or in the midterm. It introduces highest degrees of pollution and takes away the advantage of arable land that we may have. So I feel that the conversion of coal-based capacity to LNG-based capacity may be a very prudent step needed. And I also would like to perhaps advocate that going towards a comprehensive, renewable solution in Bangladeshi context may never be possible, just because of due to the same limitation of land. Solar remains perhaps the highest contributor of renewable energy to the world, and Bangladesh's land constraint will never make it favorable for us.
Thank you.
However, we can try. I'm just 30 seconds, if I may be added.
Sure.
However, we may try to import hydropower from Nepal and Bhutan in large quantities, which may add significant amount of renewable capacity to our system. Thank you. That is all I have to add.
Thank you, Mr. Imran Karim, for sharing with us your very distinct private sector perspective. I think that many of the points that you have mentioned, I think there will be consensus. You have mentioned about moving away from coal as a welcome initiative. You have rightly observed that we are going to, transitioning to imported fuel-based power generation system, which obviously has its own specificities, and people will have different perspectives on that. But I think the important point that you have mentioned about efficiency is very, I think, critical at this juncture as we design our new policy. And whether it is public sector and whether the public sector has to provide subsidies, that is sometimes obviously needed, but we cannot really shy away from the issues of efficiency. Efficiency is something which should not differentiate between public sector and private sector. It is something which is needed for efficient use of our very scarce and limited resources. I think that point is very well taken. Thank you, Mr. Karim. I would now like to bring in Professor M. Tamim. I think the audience, everyone knows him. He was former special assistant to the chief advisor, and he's a professor in BUET. And Tamim, I would like to request you also in your 7 minutes to share your views with regard to demand projection. And Dr. Moazam has made a number of observations with regard to that, and has mentioned about the limitations of GDP-centric demand projections. But what do you think, what should really, because this is at the center of any strategy that we do over the medium term. How do you think it should be done? What factors should be considered? and particularly also because of the issues of excess supply that we have. This issue is becoming also very important. So over to you, Dr. Tamim.
Thank you. I'll be speaking in Bangla and English.
Yes, sure.
I congratulate Dr. Muazzem and his team on an elaborate research work. I see a lot of references. I wish you had a list of references at the end of your presentation so that we could look into those. That's one thing. Second thing is that I think your original idea of focusing on demand forecast would have been better, because I think too many facts and too many issues has been crammed in a 55-slide presentation, and it's all too, compact and packed. It's very difficult to, screen through all those and get the information properly. Although you focused in your presentation on the key issues. So we have been asked about the demand forecast. I'll come to that. There is PESMP 2016 forecast and actual forecast. I think there are some copy-paste situation in your presentation. You should check that 2000 PESMP 2016 forecast and actual forecast. In terms of demand forecast, I agree 100% with Muazzem that our focus should be short to medium term. I have been proposing for a long time now that we should go for a 5-year doable, tractable, with finance and solid plan on the ground or in process plan for 5-year and a midterm of 10-year. We may have a vision of 20 years or something maximum, not more than that. But that no detailing is required for that, and no amount of effort should be given anything beyond 10 years in terms of financing and actual technology and human resources of the planning. So this can be easily done. There is the bottom-up approach I have been proposing, that I have been saying that it should be a bottom-up approach. And I will just give you an example how easily it can be done. Before that, I will mention that none of these GDP elasticity models or past trend extrapolation models, which have been used for 2005, 10, and 16, been able to predict even a 5-year projection. The projection for 5 years has not been correct. There has been quite a bit of mismatch. A 10% mismatch is acceptable. We can accept that. But there has been more mismatch, with that. And government policy, of course, is very ambitious. Always government policy is very ambitious. But the agencies, they go for government policy. And in government policy 2010, it showed 70,000 megawatt demand in 2020. In PESMP 2010. So that's quite high. And if you look at the current 5-year plan, it says that 2021 the demand will be 24,000 megawatts. They are doing the planning in 2020, 5-year plan from 21 to 25, and saying that sitting on 2020 where the maximum demand is 13,000, saying that the demand in 2021 will be 24,000 megawatt. And in 2025, it will be 30,000 megawatt. So there is a huge discrepancy between plannings with different government agencies. PDB with PESMP, which is only 4-year-old, 2016, is saying that our demand is about 13,000 in 2020. 5-year plan is saying it is 25. And 5-year plan said that it was 23,000 megawatt in this. And these are all related to the GDP growth prediction. 5-year plan for 2015 to 20, they said that the GDP growth prediction was 7.4%. Average, continuous 5-year 7.4%. We achieved very close to that actually. But I have shown in one of my papers that there is a huge disconnect between GDP growth and power growth. The GDP elasticity or economic elasticity that has been used has been completely disconnected. The reason is that the prediction of industrial sector growth did not materialize. There was an asymptotic growth predicted for industrial sector that would have matched this demand forecast that has been shown in those predictions. But that did not happen. But still the GDP grew. GDP grew at 7.4, 7.5, 7.6%. The reason is the public sector investment. We have seen that the huge public sector investment in the last 4 or 5 years has actually buoyed the GDP growth to a very high level. So I think it is very easy to find out what is the current state of the industries. For example, for industries, okay? What are the ceramics factories which are in plan, which are in making, and what will be their demand? What are the pharmaceutical factories? What are the expansion plan or the new plans of garments and textiles? That can be easily found out, and then easily we can have a very close, very good prediction for industrial sector for the next 5 years. Similarly, residential sector is increasing. The social scientists are looking into the data for urbanization. We have REB data where a 100 kilowatt connection that was given 5 years back, we have data that how much they are using now. So existing connection, how this can be, how that is going to increase, and due to urbanization, the new connections and development happening in the urban centers, that is where is the growth of domestic sector, that can be easily modeled and found out for the domestic sector. These are the two main sectors. Agriculture and commercial and others can be lumped as a from the past trend analysis, we can see that this will be the trend because those numbers are very small. But industry and residential requires detailed analysis and prediction. So I agree that this should be a bottom-up approach, much closer monitoring. Those are the right way of doing it that will allow us to avoid excess capacity. Regarding excess capacity, there is a little bit of misleading data here. If you look at I have looked into 2020 on a particular day, I think September 6, the total production was about close to 13,000 megawatt, 12,700 or 12,800 megawatt, and the capacity was 20,000. Dual-rated capacity was about 19,000 megawatt. Out of that, 14,800 megawatt was available. It was said. If you look at the daily data, I looked into the daily data of that day, and you saw that 14,500, about 15,000 megawatt is available. 3,000 megawatt, 1,500 megawatt was not available due to shutdown, old plants and other things. Another 1,500 megawatt could not produce due to shortage of fuel, gas, water, oil, whatever, all fuel shortage. So 3,000 megawatt goes there. And because of the plant capacity and other issues, only 15,000. So if you have 15,000 maximum available or producible capacity and producing 13,000, the excess capacity is only 13 to 15%. So, but if you look at the number, it is 20,000. So that is the excess capacity over 40%. So actually, you have to go into the detail and why these numbers are high, why 21,000 is being projected, and including captive, you are saying that we have 24,000 megawatt capacity. That is out of more as a political ambition and political commitment. They say that we'll have that. Actual capacity, actual effective capacity is about 15,000 megawatt. So when we have a 13,000 to 14,000 megawatt demand, that is not much excess power actually. So what we need to do, we need to retire all those old plants and talk about the true capacity that we do have. So we should, instead of saying we have 20,000 non-producible capacity, we should say that yes, we have solid 15,000 capacity. And that is what should be the number. So excess capacity, we shouldn't get too worried right now. Another thing is that if you look at the plans, past plans and future plans. I did a plan analysis long time back, starting from 1972, looking at all the 5-year plans and everything. The slippage means plan and actual establishment, the variation of having the plans made. About 50%. PDB has a record of 50%. আমরা যদি 2010 সালের পরিকল্পনা দেখি যে 2010 সাল থেকে 2015 সাল পর্যন্ত কি পরিমাণ পাওয়ার প্ল্যান আসবে PSMP 2010 এর, সেখানে দেখতে পাই মাত্র 60% প্ল্যান অ্যাকচুয়ালি ম্যাটেরিয়ালাইজ হয়েছে, 40% হয়নি। সো দ্যাট অ্যাভারেজ 50% স্লিপেজ ইজ দেয়ার। সো এখন এইসব পরিকল্পনা করা হচ্ছে, সরকার যেগুলো পরিকল্পনা করছেন, I really don't think all of them will come in line. But if it comes, then we are in big trouble. Excess capacity will be there. So, our realistic plan করা উচিত। আর fuel mixer ক্ষেত্রে I'll just have a one small comment. সেটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা চাই সাস্টেনেবল ডেভেলপমেন্টে যেতে, আমরা চাই রিনিউয়েবলে যেতে, কিন্তু প্রতিটা দেশে জিওগ্রাফিক্যাল লোকেশন, পপুলেশন ডেনসিটি, ল্যান্ড স্কারসিটি, এগুলোর উপর সব ডিপেন্ড করে এইটা কিন্তু একটা লিমিটেশন আছে। সরকার যেমন একটা উইশ লিস্ট দিচ্ছে, বাইরের থেকে আমরাও কিন্তু একটা উইশ লিস্ট দিয়ে যাচ্ছি। যেমন আজকে সিপিডি এর একটা উইশ লিস্ট হলো যে কোল বেস পাওয়ার প্ল্যান্ট যেগুলো বাতিল হয়েছে সেগুলোকে রিনিউয়েবলে দেওয়া হোক ইনস্টেড অফ এলএনজি। 100 একরের একটা জমিতে যেখানে 600 মেগাওয়াট কোল বা পাওয়ার প্ল্যান্ট হতো, সেখানে রিনিউয়েবলে দিলে ইট উইল বি 25 মেগাওয়াট। সো এটা বলাটা সহজ, বাট অ্যাকচুয়ালি কার্যক্ষেত্রে করতে গেলে সেটা কিন্তু সহজ না। 600 মেগাওয়াটকে আমি 25 মেগাওয়াট দিয়ে রিপ্লেস করলে আমার লাভ হবে না, যেখানে আমার পরিকল্পনা ছিল 600 মেগাওয়াট পাওয়া, এবং যেটার জন্য 100 একর জমি লাগে। সো লিমিটেশনস অফ দিস থিংস, আর যেটা আমাদের পরিকল্পনা করা হয়েছে, এটা টেকনিক্যালি ভায়াবল হতে হবে। তো টেকনিক্যালি ভায়াবল পরিকল্পনা, তারপরে ট্রানজিশনটা আমাদেরকে প্ল্যান করতে হবে, বিকজ ভ্যারিয়েবল সাপ্লাই, উই নো দ্যাট রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জি হ্যাজ এ ভ্যারিয়েবল সাপ্লাই। স্টোরেজ সিচুয়েশন কি হবে, গ্রিডের সিচুয়েশন কি হবে, ফ্রিকোয়েন্সিটা কিভাবে আমরা অ্যাডজাস্ট করব, এই জিনিসগুলো অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমাদেরকে আমরা রিনিউয়েবলে যে ইনভেস্টমেন্টের কথা বলছি তার চাইতে অলমোস্ট সমান পরিমাণ ইনভেস্টমেন্ট লাগবে আমাদের গ্রিড সিস্টেমে এটাকে অ্যাকোমোডেট করতে। অল্প পরিমাণ যদি হয়, 40,000 মেগাওয়াটের মধ্যে যদি 4-5,000 রিনিউয়েবল হয়, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই, এটা খুব একটা মেজর অ্যাডজাস্টমেন্ট লাগবে না। কিন্তু এটা যদি 20,000 মেগাওয়াট হয়, 50% যদি আমরা রিনিউয়েবলের দিকে যাই, তাহলে কিন্তু আমাদের স্মার্ট গ্রিড লাগবে এবং আমাদের আরো অনেক বেশি ইনভেস্ট করতে হবে গ্রিড এবং এতে। পার্সোনালিও একটা ব্যাপার আছে, আমাদের অটোমেশনের ইস্যু আছে। এনিওয়ে, আই থিঙ্ক একটা জিনিস সিবিডি যেটা করা উচিত ছিল, আমাদের পিএসএমপি গুলোতে আমরা দেখেছি যে 2030 সালের মধ্যে অ্যাটলিস্ট বিদ্যুৎ উৎপাদনের যে এনার্জিটা আসার কথা, তার 90% এনার্জি বিদেশ থেকে আমদানি হবে। এইটার ফিনান্সিয়াল ইমপ্লিকেশনসটা কি, এটা কিন্তু খুবই জরুরি। আলটিমেটলি আমরা কিন্তু এই যে এলএনজি আমদানিতে $38 যখন এলএনজি হয়ে গেল, দুটো কনসাইনমেন্ট, দুটো স্পট প্রাইস আমরা কিনলাম না, বিকজ ইট ইজ টু হাই এ প্রাইস এন্ড উই কুড নট এফোর্ড দ্যাট। এইটার কিন্তু বাড়বে যত বেশি আমাদের ডিপেন্ডেন্সি ইন্টারন্যাশনাল ইম্পোর্টের উপরে, সেখানে প্রাইস রিস্ক এন্ড সাপ্লাই রিস্ক দুটোই বেড়ে যাবে। এই ঝুঁকি আমরা কিভাবে কমাতে পারি, আর আমরা যেটা বলছি লিস্ট কস্ট, এটাও একটা দেখতে হবে, আমরা কি সত্যি লিস্ট কস্টে দিতে চাই নাকি রিজনেবল কস্টে যেতে চাই, বিকজ লিস্ট কস্টে সাবসিডির ইস্যু চলে আসে। সো আমাদের যে কস্ট আমরা কমাতে চাই, কিন্তু এটা রিজনেবল মার্কেট প্রাইস হওয়া উচিত কিনা সেটাও আমাদের ভাবা উচিত অন রিয়েলিটি। সো এই ইস্যুগুলো হার্ড ইস্যু, নট পপুলার, বাট দিস নিড টু বি অ্যাড্রেসড বাই সিপিডি। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Professor Tamim. I think very insightful comments, which will not only enrich Dr. Muazzam in his presentation, but also in terms of the new policy and strategy that we are designing. I think you have very rightly mentioned about the various aspects which need to be considered in estimating the demands. and we will have to come out of just the GDP-centric estimates. You have very rightly mentioned about what is the composition of the GDP. I think that is very important. You have mentioned two elements, industry and urbanization. I think this is very, very important. And you have also mentioned about the plan being realistic. You have preferred a 5 to 10 year plan rather than a 20-year plan. A 20-year may be a vision perspective. But you have also mentioned about the discrepancy between the various government institutions, the PDB projections and the projections in the 5-year plan. And with those type of plannings and projections, obviously there will be contradictions in implementation, and the costs involved will also be very high. Very important observation. And also you have mentioned about and forewarned about the steps that will need to be taken if we want to go to renewable. Is just not transition to a new energy, but also the associated costs in grid system and others. So thank you for that caution as well. And the last point that you have mentioned is very important. If we are planning to import 90% of our energy by 2030, what will be the financial implications? How do we ensure the returns? What will be the pricing? What will be the subsidy? I think all these are becoming very important as we go forward. Thank you, Professor Tamim. I would now like to bring in someone who has been very much involved on the side of the civil society, an activist, my good friend, Professor Anu Mohammed. You all know him, এবং তিনি অনেক বছর ধরে বাংলাদেশে এই এনার্জি সেক্টরে কনজিউমার যারা ভোক্তা আছেন এবং যারা ক্ষুদ্র উৎপাদক আছেন তাদের স্বার্থ নিয়ে আলাপ আলোচনা করেছেন, মোবিলাইজ করেছেন। তাকে আমি অনুরোধ করব তার এই যে প্রেজেন্টেশনটা হলো এবং অন্যরাও যেটা বললেন সেটা প্রেক্ষিতে আনু, ইফ ইউ কুড কাইন্ডলি শেয়ার উইথ আস what is your perspective on not per se estimation of demand, but composition কি হবে আমাদের এই যে আমদানি নির্ভরতা, এটার financial implications, and also at the center of all these is the consumer. So Anu, please, your 7-8 minutes.
ধন্যবাদ। শোনা যাচ্ছে তো না কথা?
হ্যাঁ, শোনা যাচ্ছে, বলো।
প্রথমে ডক্টর গোলাম মোয়াজ্জেম যেটা উপস্থিত করেছেন তিনি এবং তার টিম, তাদের ধন্যবাদ জানাই যে একটা এই সময় নতুন পিএসএমপি হচ্ছে সেটা সম্পর্কে নাগরিকদের পক্ষ থেকে, বিশেষজ্ঞদের পক্ষ থেকে কিছু অবজারভেশন নিয়ে আসা এবং আজকের আলোচনা যেখানে অনেকের মতামত সেখানে থাকবে। তবে আমার ধারণা হচ্ছে যে এটা আমরা এই আলোচনাটা করছি, এটার একটা একাডেমিক ভ্যালু আছে, তারপরে পাবলিক অপিনিয়ন তৈরি করার ক্ষেত্রেও ভ্যালু আছে, কিন্তু সরকারের জন্য কতটা গুরুত্ব আছে সেটা আমার যথেষ্ট সন্দেহ আছে। কারণ সরকার বাংলাদেশের বিশেষজ্ঞ কিংবা বাংলাদেশের নাগরিকদের মতামতকে গুরুত্ব দিচ্ছে এটার কোনো প্রমাণ আমরা অতীতে পাইনি। এবং অতীতে যে পিএসএমপি যেটা হয়েছে, যে পিএসএমপি 2016 যেটা নিয়ে আজকে প্রেজেন্টেশন আলোচনা শুরু হয়েছে, সেই পিএসএমপিটা খেয়াল করলে আমরা দেখব যে পিএসএমপি প্রণয়ন করেছে জাইকাকে এই প্রেজেন্টেশনে ধন্যবাদ দেওয়া হয়েছে, কিন্তু আমি ঠিক ধন্যবাদ দিতে পারছি না তাদের, কারণ জাইকা যে পিএসএমপিটা প্রণয়ন করেছে সেই পিএসএমপিটা পাওয়ার সেক্টর মাস্টার প্ল্যান আমাদের পুরো এনার্জি অ্যান্ড পাওয়ার সেক্টর সেটাকে এমন দিকে নিয়ে যাচ্ছে, এমন একটা ধরন তৈরি করেছে। এবং এটা সরকারের কি ব্যাখ্যা আমি জানি না, যে একটা বাংলাদেশের জ্বালানি ও বিদ্যুৎ খাতের মহাপরিকল্পনা হবে, সেখানে বাংলাদেশের কোনো বিশেষজ্ঞ নাই। বাংলাদেশে কি কোনো বিশেষজ্ঞ তৈরি হয়নি 50 বছরে যারা মহাপরিকল্পনা তৈরি করতে পারে? বাংলাদেশের ভবিষ্যৎ কি দরকার, বাংলাদেশের পটভূমি কি, বাংলাদেশের নিজস্ব বৈশিষ্ট্য কি সেটাকে বিবেচনা করে কি ধরনের মহাপরিকল্পনা বাংলাদেশের জন্য সঠিক হবে সেটা বোঝার ক্ষমতা কি বাংলাদেশের লোকজনের নাই, বাংলাদেশের বিশেষজ্ঞদের নাই? আমরা পিএসএমপি দেখছি যেটা পুরোপুরি জায়গা এবং জাপানি কয়েকটা প্রাইভেট কোম্পানি দ্বারা প্রণীত, এবং সেখানে সকলে পুরো দলটাই হচ্ছে জাপানি বিভিন্ন প্রাইভেট কোম্পানির সাথে সম্পৃক্ত। এখানে কনফ্লিক্ট অফ ইন্টারেস্টের একটা ব্যাপার আছে, কারণ জাপানি বিভিন্ন কোম্পানি এখন বাংলাদেশে বিদ্যুৎ খাতে, জ্বালানি বিদ্যুৎ খাতে তারা বিনিয়োগ করছে। এই কনফ্লিক্ট অফ ইন্টারেস্টের ব্যাপারটা কি সরকার কিভাবে দেখতে পারে সেটাও আমরা জানি। এবং সেখানে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে এখানে বলা হয়েছে আজকে প্রেজেন্টেশনে যে জাইকা মনে করে যে বাংলাদেশে একটা ক্লিন এনার্জি ট্রান্সফরমেশন যাতে হয় সে ব্যাপারে তারা হেল্প করে, কিন্তু আমরা তাদের পিএসএমপি তে দেখতে পাচ্ছি পুরোপুরি ভাবে একটা বিপজ্জনক দিকে নিয়ে যাওয়া, মানে কয়লা কেন্দ্রিক, পারমাণবিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্রিক এবং আমদানি ভিত্তিক, বিদেশি তহবিল ভিত্তিক, ব্যবসায়িক প্রতিষ্ঠান ভিত্তিক একটা মহাপরিকল্পনা প্রণয়ন করা হয়েছে। এবং কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র দিয়ে বাংলাদেশের উপকূল, আমরা কক্সবাজার থেকে সুন্দরবন পর্যন্ত দেখি যে কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র ভরা সেখানে। এর মধ্যে সরকার কয়েকটা কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র করবে না, সেটা আজকে প্রেজেন্টেশনে বলা হয়েছে, সেজন্য অভিনন্দন জানানো হয়েছে। তো যেগুলো সরকার করছে না সেগুলো মধ্যে দিয়ে আন্তর্জাতিকভাবে সরকার একটা হাততালি পাচ্ছে, কিন্তু সরকারের আমরা যদি রিভাইজড পিএসএমপি দেখি তাহলে দেখি যে পার্সেন্টেজ হিসেবে আগে ছিল 35 ভাগ, এখন হয়েছে 32 ভাগ, কিন্তু মোট পরিমাণের দিক থেকে এই রিভাইজড যে মহাপরিকল্পনা সেখানে আগে ছিল 19,000, এখন হয়েছে 25,000। তো এই যে কয়েকটা প্ল্যান বাদ দেওয়া হলো, সেটা বাদ দেওয়ার কনসিস্টেন্ট কোনো অন্যান্য স্টেপ আমরা দেখি না, যেটা আজকে প্রেজেন্টেশনে বলা হয়েছে যেটা কোনো কনসিস্টেন্ট অন্যান্য ক্ষেত্রে পলিসির ক্ষেত্রে দেখা যাচ্ছে না। তার মানে হচ্ছে যে যেগুলো বাদ দেওয়া হয়েছে সেগুলো হয়তো প্রস্তুতিমূলক সমস্যা কিংবা লেনদেনের কোনো সমস্যা থাকতে পারে, কিন্তু কয়লা কেন্দ্রিক চিন্তার ক্ষেত্রে কোনো ধরনের পরিবর্তন আসলে হয় না। এটা আমরা সরকারের বিভিন্ন তরফ থেকে দেখি যে সরকারের দুটো ভয়েস দেখা যায়। একটা ভয়েস হচ্ছে দেশের, আরেকটা হচ্ছে আন্তর্জাতিক দরবারে গিয়ে সরকার বলছে যে আমরা রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জির দিকে যাচ্ছি, সামনের আগামী 2050 এর মধ্যে 100% রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জি করবো, সামনে 10 ভাগ করবো, এরকম নানা রকম প্রতিশ্রুতি, রুফটপ নিয়ে অনেক রকম তারা সাবাস পাচ্ছেন, কিন্তু বাস্তবে দেশের মধ্যে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে জলবায়ু পরিবর্তনের জন্য বিপজ্জনক যা যা কিছু আছে সেই দিকেই সরকার যাচ্ছে এবং উপকূলকেই সবচেয়ে বেশি বিপজ্জনক জায়গাতে ঠেলে দেওয়া হচ্ছে। এবং এইটা এই যে পিএসএমপি 2016-তে সেটাকেই বৈধতা দেওয়া হয়েছে। এটা পরিবর্তন হবে, এটা ডাইরেকশনের কোনো পরিবর্তন হবে সেটার কোনো লক্ষণ আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি। প্রবলেম, এই যে প্রবলেমটা তৈরি হয়েছে, প্রবলেমটা আমরা যেমন ডিমান্ডের কথাটা যেটা ডক্টর তামিম বললেন, বিভিন্ন সরকারি ডকুমেন্টের মধ্যে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় বিভিন্ন রকম হিসাব করা হয়। এখন সিদ্ধান্তটা কিভাবে হয়? সিদ্ধান্তটা কি এটা হয় যে পরিকল্পনা করা হলো, পরিকল্পনার পরে মানে বাস্তব পরিস্থিতি পর্যালোচনা করে একটা পরিকল্পনা করা হচ্ছে, সেই পরিকল্পনার পরে উদ্যোগ গ্রহণ করা হচ্ছে, সেটা কি হচ্ছে? আমরা আমাদের স্টাডি থেকে দেখি যে সরকারের সমস্ত কিছু যেগুলো হচ্ছে সেগুলো প্রথমত সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া হচ্ছে কি কি করা হবে, তারপরে সেটাকে রেশনালাইজ করার জন্য পরিকল্পনা বা অন্যান্য ডকুমেন্টের মধ্যে আনা হচ্ছে। এবং এই যে সিদ্ধান্তগুলো নেওয়া হচ্ছে, সিদ্ধান্তগুলো কিভাবে নেওয়া হচ্ছে, কার মাধ্যমে নেওয়া হচ্ছে? আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে বিশেষজ্ঞদের তুলনায় বাংলাদেশের বিশেষজ্ঞ কিংবা বাংলাদেশের নাগরিকদের মত কিংবা সুযোগ সুবিধা ইত্যাদি, তাদের যে স্বার্থ, কনজিউমারদের স্বার্থ, ভোক্তার স্বার্থ, বিদ্যুতের দাম, পরিবেশ, এই সমস্ত কিছুর চাইতে অনেক বেশি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন কর্পোরেট লবিস্ট ভূমিকাটা হচ্ছে অনেক বেশি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। সেখানে রাশিয়ান কিংবা চীন কিংবা ভারত কিংবা জাপান কিংবা যুক্তরাষ্ট্র, তাদের লবিস্টরাই দেখা যাচ্ছে যে বিশেষজ্ঞ কিংবা নাগরিকদের মধ্যে চাইতে অনেক গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। সুতরাং সিদ্ধান্তটা হচ্ছে কোন লবিস্টরা, এটা লবিস্টদের মধ্যে হবে নানা রকম কনফ্লিক্ট থাকে, কোন লবিস্টরা কত বেশি সরকারের উপর প্রভাব বিস্তার করতে পারছে সেটার উপরে সিদ্ধান্ত গৃহীত হচ্ছে। তার ফলে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ট্রান্সপারেন্সি, মানে আমরা ধরেন 2010 সালে একটা আইন হয়েছিল, সেটাকে আমরা পরিষ্কারভাবে বলতে পারি এটা একটা ইমিউনিটি ল, মানে দায় মুক্তি আইন। এবং সেই 2010 সালে আইনের এখন পর্যন্ত সেই আইনটা কিন্তু এক্সটেন্ড করে এখন পর্যন্ত সেটা আছে। এবং সেই আইন অনুযায়ী টেন্ডার ছাড়া সরকার একক সিদ্ধান্তে বিভিন্ন ধরনের প্রজেক্ট পাস করছে, এবং তার ফলে এখানে কোনো আপনার অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটি বা ট্রান্সপারেন্সি এই সমস্ত কোনো জায়গা নেই। এই সিদ্ধান্তগুলো তাহলে কিভাবে হচ্ছে? এই সিদ্ধান্তগুলোর সাথে জাতীয় স্বার্থগুলি বা জনগণের স্বার্থগুলি এই সমস্ত কোনো সম্পর্ক। এখন বাংলাদেশে এই যে কয়লা কেন্দ্রিকতা কিংবা আমদানি, আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি ইদানিং এলএনজি আমদানির উপরে একটা গুরুত্ব দেওয়া হচ্ছে, এবং যেটা আইপিপি প্রতিনিধি যিনি বললেন, করিম সাহেব বললেন যে এটা কস্টের কথা বললেন, এবং চুক্তিগুলো দেখেন, চুক্তিগুলো এমন ভাবে করা হচ্ছে, এলএনজি আমদানির জন্য চুক্তি করা হচ্ছে, যখন বলা হচ্ছে যে আমাদের গ্যাসের সংকট, সেই জন্য এলএনজি আমদানি করতে হবে, গ্যাসের সংকট সেই জন্য কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র করতে হবে। কিন্তু গ্যাস, বাংলাদেশের গ্যাস অনুসন্ধানের ব্যাপারে কি হলো? সেই গ্যাস অনুসন্ধানের খবর কি? গ্যাস অনুসন্ধান কেন করা হচ্ছে না? সেটার জন্য জাতীয় যে সক্ষমতা, সেই সক্ষমতা কেন ডেভেলপ করা হয়নি, বিকশিত করা হয়? আমরা ধরেন এটা হলো 2021 সাল, 2009 সালে কনক ও ফিলিপসের সাথে সরকার চুক্তি করেছিল রপ্তানিমুখী গ্যাস রপ্তানিমুখী চুক্তি। তার বিরুদ্ধে যখন আমরা কথা বলেছিলাম, সরকার দমন পীড়ন করে তারপরে বলেছিল যে আমাদের এই মুহূর্তে গ্যাস দরকার, সুতরাং কনক ও ফিলিপসের সাথে চুক্তি করা দরকার, এবং সরকার তাই করেছিল, সরকার চুক্তি করেছিল কনক ও ফিলিপসের সাথে। সেই কনক ও ফিলিপস তারপরে সেটা সাব কন্ট্রাক্টরকে দিয়েছে, চীনা সাব কন্ট্রাক্টর। সেই সাব কন্ট্রাক্টরের মাধ্যমে তারা কিছু কাজ করে, তার মধ্যে তাদের শেয়ার প্রাইস তাদের বেড়েছে, তাদের লাভ যাওয়া হয়েছে, তারপরে তারা চলে গেছে। এই যে, কিন্তু আমাদের বক্তব্য ছিল যে পেট্রো বাংলাকে এই দায়িত্বটা দিলে, যেখানে আমাদের ঘাটতি আছে সেখানে যদি আমরা সাব কন্ট্রাক্টর নিয়োগ করি, সেখানে যদি আমরা প্রয়োজন মতো বিদেশ থেকে বিশেষজ্ঞ নিয়ে আসি, কিংবা আমাদের যারা বিশেষজ্ঞ আছে, আমাদের যারা কর্মকর্তা আছে বা যারা কাজ করে, তাদেরকে যদি জ্ঞান অর্জনের জন্য, তাদের যে বিশেষায়নের জন্য আমরা যদি বিদেশে পাঠাই, তাহলে এই যে চিন্তা করেন, সেভাবে যদি সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া হতো 2009 2021 এর মধ্যেই কিন্তু আমরা গ্যাস অনুসন্ধানের তুলনায় অনেকখানি অগ্রসর হতাম। সেটা যদি পারতাম, তাহলে আমাদের গ্যাস ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ উৎপাদনের ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের এলএনজির উপর নির্ভর করতে হতো না, এবং এখনকার যে চাহিদা, সেই চাহিদা পূরণের জন্য কয়লার দিকে বা পারমাণবিকের মতো ভয়াবহ যে বিপজ্জনক জায়গা, সেগুলো যেতে হবে। সেই জায়গাটা কর্মকর চলে গেছে। এরপরেও সরকারের দিক থেকে তেমন কোনো উদ্যোগ গ্রহণ করা হয়নি গ্যাস অনুসন্ধান বা উত্তোলন। অনশোরেও দেখা যাচ্ছে যে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় বিভিন্ন যে সমস্ত সম্ভাবনা আছে, যেমন ভোলাতে একটা ভালো সম্ভাবনা আছে, সেটা অনেক বেশি দামে গাজপ্রমকে দেওয়া হচ্ছে। আমরা যখনই জাতীয় সক্ষমতার কথা বলি বা জাতীয় সংস্থাগুলোকে শক্তিশালী করার কথা বলি, সরকার থেকে একটা কথা বলা হয়, বা অনেকেই বলেন, প্রচারক যারা, তারা বলেন যে সরকার একটু ব্যবসা করার কথা, রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থা তো ব্যবসা করার কথা, এটি সবসময় তারা বলে। কিন্তু আপনারা দেখেন, খেয়াল করে দেখেন, পুরো এনার্জি অ্যান্ড পাওয়ার সেক্টরে কারা ব্যবসা করছে? আপনি যদি তাকান, এক রামপাল বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র, যেটা সুন্দরবনের শেষ করতে যাচ্ছে, বাংলাদেশকে ভয়ঙ্কর রকম বিপদের মধ্যে ফেলতে যাচ্ছে, সেই রামপাল বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্রে কতগুলো রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থা জড়িত। ভারতের এনটিপিসি সেখানে জড়িত, ভারতীয় হেভি ইলেকট্রিক লিমিটেড কোম্পানি সেটা জড়িত, ভেল জড়িত, ভারতের রাষ্ট্রীয় এক্সিম ব্যাংক জড়িত, এমনকি ভারতের রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থা কোল ইন্ডিয়া সেটাও তার সাথে সম্পর্কিত। আপনি যদি রূপপুর পারমাণবিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্রে যান, রাশিয়ান যে রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থা রোসাটম সেটার সাথে আছে। বিভিন্ন জায়গায় যে গ্যাস ব্লকের চুক্তি হচ্ছে, সেখানে ওএনজিসি আছে, ভারতের কোম্পানি। চীনের পাওয়ার চায়না সহ বিভিন্ন রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থা সেখানে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় জড়িত আছে। তার মানে অন্য দেশের রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থাগুলোকে ব্যবসা দেওয়ার ক্ষেত্রে সরকার সম্পূর্ণ রকমের উদার, এবং বাংলাদেশের জাতীয় সংস্থাকে কোণঠাসা করে চাপিয়ে তারপরে তাদেরকে ব্যবসা দেওয়া হচ্ছে। অথচ বাংলাদেশের জাতীয় সংস্থাগুলোকে বিকশিত করা বা তাদেরকে সক্ষমতা বাড়ানোর জন্য কোন রকম উদ্যোগ নেই, এবং সেই উদ্যোগহীনতাকে তারা বলছে যে ব্যবসা দেওয়ার প্রশ্ন না, রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থার দায়িত্ব হচ্ছে, কিছু দায়িত্ব আছে, জাতীয় দায়িত্ব। বাংলাদেশের এনার্জি সেক্টরটা হচ্ছে একটা স্ট্র্যাটেজিক সেক্টর। এই স্ট্র্যাটেজিক সেক্টরে সুনির্দিষ্ট ডাইরেকশনে পরিচালনা করার জন্যই রাষ্ট্রীয় সংস্থাগুলোকে, জাতীয় সংস্থাগুলোকে শক্তিশালী করতে হবে। তার মানে আমরা এগুলোকে বিবেচনা করেই 2017 সালে আমরা নিজেরা একটা বিকল্প মহাপরিকল্পনার প্রস্তাব করেছি। তো সরকার তো দেশের বিশেষজ্ঞদের গুরুত্ব দেয় না, কিন্তু আমরা তারপরেও করেছিলাম তারপরে আমরা যারা প্রবাসী বাংলাদেশের অনেক বিশেষজ্ঞ আছেন যারা কাজ করতে চান, যারা কন্ট্রিবিউট করতে চান, তাদেরকে আমরা এর মধ্যে যুক্ত করেছিলাম। তারপরে অন্যান্য দেশে যেমন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র এবং অস্ট্রেলিয়া এবং ইউরোপের বিভিন্ন বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের শিক্ষকরা কাজ করছেন, তাদেরকে যুক্ত করেছিলাম। করে আমরা একটা অল্টারনেটিভ একটা মাস্টার প্ল্যান জমা দিয়েছি এবং সেটার মূল ফোকাসটা আমরা দেখেছি যে বাংলাদেশের জন্য কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র হচ্ছে খুবই সুইসাইডাল। যেমন ডক্টর তামিম বলেছেন বা এর আগেও আমরা শুনেছি এটা, যে বাংলাদেশের জন্য তো রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জি খুব অসুবিধাজনক, যেহেতু এখানে জমি কম, তারপরে মানুষের ঘনত্ব বেশি। ঠিক সুনির্দিষ্টভাবে এই কারণে কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র কোনোভাবে গ্রহণযোগ্য হয় না। কারণ যে জমি, আবাদি জমি এবং পানি সম্পদ আমাদের একটা বড় শক্তি, এবং আমাদের যে জনবসতি সেইটার উপরে যে প্রভাবটা কয়লা ভিত্তিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্রের পড়বে, তার যে পানি দূষণ, মাটি দূষণ, বন দূষণ যে মাত্রায় হবে, তার যে এনভায়রনমেন্টাল এন্ড সোশ্যাল কস্ট এত হাই যে এইটা কোনোভাবেই সস্তা বিদ্যুৎ বলা যায় না কয়লা, সেটা হচ্ছে অনেক বেশি এক্সপেন্সিভ। সেই জন্য কয়লা এবং পারমাণবিক বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র ঠিক একই কারণে বাংলাদেশের মতো দেশের জন্য একটা ভয়ঙ্কর আত্মঘাতী এবং অনেক বেশি ব্যয়বহুল, এবং প্রত্যেকটাই কিন্তু অনেক বেশি ব্যয়বহুল। সেইটার বিকল্প হিসাবে আমরা পরিষ্কার দেখেছিলাম যে বিশ্বব্যাপী যে গতিটা আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি, প্রযুক্তির গতি, চিন্তার গতি, সেটা দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে বিকাশমান যে প্রযুক্তি সেটা হচ্ছে রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জি, এবং যে প্রযুক্তি এবং যে ধরনটা এখন সারা বিশ্বে পরিত্যক্ত হচ্ছে, যেটা নিন্দিত হচ্ছে, সেই কয়লা এবং পারমাণবিক বিদ্যুৎটা হচ্ছে এটা পরিত্যক্ত, সেইটাকে বাংলাদেশ গ্রহণ করছে। কিন্তু যেটা বিকশিত হচ্ছে, বিকাশমান প্রযুক্তি, সেটাকে বাংলাদেশ মনে করছে যে এটা আমরা গ্রহণ করার কোনো সুযোগ নেই। অথচ বাংলাদেশে কিন্তু একটা বিরাট অপরচুনিটি ছিল। যেমন আমি ভারত এবং চীন দুই দেশে তারা কয়লা থেকে, পারমাণবিক থেকে তারা শিফট করে রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জির দিকে যাচ্ছে, কিন্তু এই শিফটিংটা তাদের জন্য খুবই পেইনফুল এবং কস্টলি হচ্ছে এই কারণে যে সেখানে অনেক বিনিয়োগ আছে, সেখানে অনেক কর্মসংস্থান আছে, সুতরাং তারা যখন শিফট করছে এটা নিয়ে একটা সামাজিক, অর্থনৈতিক অনেক চাপ তৈরি হচ্ছে। তো বাংলাদেশের একটা বিরাট অপরচুনিটি ছিল যে বাংলাদেশের ওই রকম কোনো চাপ নেই, বাংলাদেশ খুব সহজে, স্মুথলি বাংলাদেশ একটা নতুন দিগন্ত উন্মোচন করতে পারতো এবং পৃথিবীর মধ্যে বাংলাদেশ একটা মডেল হিসেবে দাঁড়াতে পারতো। সেই অপরচুনিটিটা পুরোপুরি ভাবে ত্যাগ করে, সেটাকে উপেক্ষা করে বাংলাদেশ ওই পুরনো পরিত্যক্ত প্রযুক্তির জগতের মধ্যে বাংলাদেশ প্রবেশ করছে, নিজেদের দেশের মানুষকে একটা ভয়ঙ্কর বিপদের মধ্যে ফেলে। এই অবস্থায় আমি মনে করি যে সমস্যাগুলো আছে সেই সমস্যাগুলো অ্যাড্রেস করা দরকার। যে সমস্যাগুলোতে সরকার ভুগছে, একটা সমস্যা যেটা আমি আগে বললাম যে জাতীয় সক্ষমতা বাড়ানো মানে বাপের শুধু না, এটা রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জি ক্ষেত্রে যদি জাতীয় সক্ষমতা না বাড়ে, আমরা যদি কিছু প্রাইভেট কোম্পানি যারা বিনিয়োগ করবে তাদের উপরে ভরসা করে বসে নেয়, এবং এর মধ্যে কিছু চুক্তি হয়েছে যেগুলো খুব সুবিধাজনক চুক্তি হয়, সেটার উপরে যদি আমরা বসে থাকি তাহলে কোনো কাজ হয় না। সেই রিনিউয়েবল এনার্জির ক্ষেত্রে আমাদের জাতীয় প্রাতিষ্ঠানিক সংস্থা এবং দক্ষতা বাড়ানো দরকার। সেরকম কোনো প্রাতিষ্ঠানিক কাঠামো তৈরি করার উদ্যোগ হয়। আপনারা চিন্তা করেন যে এখনকার যে এনার্জি ডিমান্ড এবং বাস্তবে এনার্জি যত আমাদের পাওয়ার জেনারেশন যতটা হচ্ছে এবং যতটা ডিমান্ড আছে, সেখানে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি ওভার ক্যাপাসিটি, এবং ওভার ক্যাপাসিটি হওয়া সত্ত্বেও কেন আমাদের প্রায় বিদ্যুৎ চলে যায় আমরা জানি না। কিন্তু যাই হোক, সেই ওভার ক্যাপাসিটির জন্য বসিয়ে কিছু কোম্পানিকে টাকা দেওয়া হচ্ছে। গত বছরে, এক বছরেই প্রায় ৯,০০০ কোটি টাকা তাদের বসিয়ে দেওয়া হয়েছে। আপনারা চিন্তা করেন যে গত ১০ বছরে যদি বাংলাদেশের জাতীয় সক্ষমতা বাড়ানোর জন্য এর ১.৫ খরচ করা হয়, ধরেন বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের বিভাগ খোলা, প্রতিষ্ঠান খোলা, বিদেশে পাঠানো, বিদেশ থেকে বিশেষজ্ঞদের বাংলাদেশে নিয়ে এসে আমরা যদি একটা মিশ্র যে রিনিউয়েবল এবং নন রিনিউয়েবল এর একটা সিস্টেম দাঁড় করানোর জন্য সেরকম প্রাতিষ্ঠানিক দক্ষতা দাঁড় করাতে পারতাম, এতে ১.৫ খরচ করতে হতো না, ১ অথচ সেদিকে কিন্তু যাওয়াই হয়নি। তার ফলে এখন এই যে খরচ, আমি এখন শেষ করে দিচ্ছি, যে খরচ যেগুলো বাড়ছে সেই খরচগুলো সামনে আরো অনেক গুণ বাড়বে। দ্বিতীয় যে সমস্যা সেটা হচ্ছে যে সরকারের প্রধান প্রবণতাই হচ্ছে যে কর্পোরেট ইন্টারেস্টে, ন্যাশনাল ইন্টারেস্ট, জাতীয় স্বার্থের চাইতে বিভিন্ন বাণিজ্যিক স্বার্থকে গুরুত্ব দেওয়া। তৃতীয় সমস্যা হচ্ছে যে এই পুরো সিস্টেমের মধ্যে কোনো ট্রান্সপারেন্সি এবং অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটি নাই। চতুর্থ সমস্যা হচ্ছে যে জনগণের যে পার্টিসিপেশন, তাদের যে সম্মতি, এটাকে সম্পূর্ণভাবে উপেক্ষা করা হচ্ছে। এমনকি যে সমস্ত জায়গায় মানুষ কিছু কথা বলতে যাচ্ছে, তাদের সমস্যা, তাদের মতামত, সেটা মাতারবাড়ি বলি কিংবা রূপপুর বলি কিংবা রামপাল বলি, এই সমস্ত জায়গায় মানুষ যখন কথা বলতে যাচ্ছেন তখন তাদের উপরে নানা রকম বল প্রয়োগ করা, ডিজিটাল সিকিউরিটি আইন থেকে শুরু করে বিভিন্ন ধরনের নিপীড়নমূলক ব্যবস্থা গ্রহণ করা হচ্ছে। এবং পঞ্চমত হচ্ছে যে কম ব্যয়বহুল থেকে সরকারের বেশি আগ্রহ, বেশি ব্যয় এবং কম পরিবেশ ক্ষতিকর যে সমস্ত প্রকল্প, তার চাইতে সরকারের আগ্রহ দেখা যাচ্ছে বেশি পরিবেশ ক্ষতিকর প্রকল্পের মধ্যে যাওয়া। এটার কারণটা হচ্ছে যে এর পেছনে একটা দেশি এবং বিদেশি একটা বিশাল স্বার্থ গোষ্ঠী কাজ করছে।
ধন্যবাদ।
সেই কারণে যদি এই পুরো এই স্ট্রাকচার, যে স্ট্রাকচারের মধ্যে আমরা এখন আছি, যে ডাইরেকশনের মধ্যে আছি, এটা যদি একটা পরিবর্তন না হয়, শেষে শুধু আমি একটা কথা বলি যে সোলারের ব্যাপারে একটা যুক্তি দেওয়া হয় যে জমির অভাবের কারণে সোলারের পক্ষে সম্ভব না, কিন্তু দেখা যাচ্ছে যে এখন প্রযুক্তিগত এত বিকাশ হচ্ছে যে যে পরিমাণ জমি আগে লাগবে বলা হতো, সেই পরিমাণ জমি এখন লাগবে না। প্লাস আমাদের উপকূল জুড়ে অন্যান্য ক্ষেত্রে যে অপরচুনিটি আছে, সেটা আমরা আমাদের বিকল্প মহাপরিকল্পনার মধ্যে বিস্তৃতভাবে লিখেছি, আমি আর বিস্তৃত যাচ্ছি না। কিন্তু মোট কথা হচ্ছে যে আন্তর্জাতিক গবেষণাতেও দেখা গেছে বাংলাদেশের 1.5 ভাগ জমি লাগবে বাংলাদেশের পুরো বিদ্যুৎ যে চাহিদা, সেই চাহিদা। তার মানে হচ্ছে, আমি শেষ করি এই কথাটা বলতে, যে আমাদের অনেক বেটার অল্টারনেটিভ আছে, আমাদের অনেক বেটার অল্টারনেটিভ আছে নিরবচ্ছিন্ন বিদ্যুৎ সরবরাহ করে শতভাগ মানুষের জন্য বিদ্যুৎ নিশ্চিত করার জন্য আমাদের কয়লা কিংবা পারমাণবিক এরকম ভয়ঙ্কর বিপজ্জনক জায়গায় যাওয়া। আমাদের দরকার হচ্ছে জনগণের স্বার্থের প্রতি গুরুত্ব দেওয়া এবং জাতীয় সক্ষমতা বাড়ানোর প্রতি মনোযোগ দেওয়া। এই ডাইরেকশনটা সরকারের ঘাটটা যদি পরিবর্তন হয়, তাহলে অনেক কম দামে এবং পরিবেশ সম্মতভাবে সবার জন্য বিদ্যুৎ উৎপাদন করা খুবই সম্ভব।
ধন্যবাদ। ধন্যবাদ আনু। আমার মনে হয় বেশ কিছু গুরুত্বপূর্ণ এবং ব্যতিক্রমী আমি বলবো প্রেক্ষিত আনু নিয়ে এসেছেন। আপনারা শুনেছেন ওনার শেষ যে 5টি পয়েন্টে উনি এটা সামারাইজ করেছেন। ডিয়ার অডিয়েন্স, we have heard from Professor Anu Mohammad, who has emphasized the need for building national capacities in terms of dealing with these issues. And less dependence on foreign expertise and also foreign companies which have vested interest in the design of our policies. He has mentioned that although the government is talking about a transition from coal-based to non-coal-based, but the general direction remains very much fossil fuel one. He has mentioned about the need for more transparency and accountability to the citizens and more of a grassroots contribution to policy making. And he has mentioned the need for national institutional capacity building in Petrobangla and BAPEX. So he sees that the government is less interested in building those capacities, which could have helped us in terms of implementing our national plan, which would have addressed the national broader interest and not corporate interest. So thank you, Anu, for those points. I will now bring in our special guest, His Excellency the Ambassador, Mr. Naukuitu is with us, and I think that he would like to come at this point, and following him I will bring in another of our guest of honor, Mr. Mohammad Hussain, Director Power Cell. I would request our panelists to be a bit patient, and we will hear from them as well. Excellency, are you okay with coming at this moment? Excellency, the Ambassador? Can you देखो can you unmute please, Excellency? Yes,
So
please.
thank you very much. Uh, I'm sorry that I have a next engagement, so I have to go shortly. So that is why in the middle of your
No problem,
panel
please.
discussions, I had to intervene.
Yes, please.
But I'm so delighted to have this opportunity to join all of you for the very important discussion on this future master plan, what they call, I think, not the PSMP, but Integrated Energy and Power Master Plan. So, as has been already mentioned, JICA and its counterparts signed a record of discussion on Sunday this week. So I would say this is a very, very important type of cooperation JICA has been doing and will be doing. People really focus on infrastructure building as JICA's flagship projects. But in parallel to the implementation of those flagship projects for quality infrastructure, which this country very much needs for further rapid growth to make the most of the large potentials for growth of this country, it's really important to be engaged with this sort of a master plan formulation. So this will set the course of future policy of a very, very important sector, which is energy and power. Also to do the capacity building of the counterparts agencies, as well as to say provide opportunities to learn more about the importance of data collection. I think the last part was already discussed here. I don't know whether this is already published document or not, but when I looked at the document, the R&D, which was signed between JICA and counterpart, there are interesting sentences I spotted. I think this is what the government side explained how this was formulated, but the sentence goes, I quote, "The State Minister for Energy and Power mentioned that he is very keen to formulate integrated national energy policy which targets the low carbon neutral society," during the meeting between State Minister and Ambassador of Japan. Then the sentence goes on to say that to pursue SDGs, it is necessary to set the mid-long-term policy framework aiming at the achievement of zero carbon society by minimizing GHG's emission from new coal-fired and other thermal power plants, as well as from transport, industrial, commercial, and residential energy demands. I think these sentences really speak well for the purposes of how and what we are going to do in terms of formulating new master plan between JICA and its counterpart. Yesterday, I had a chance to attend this grand ceremony at the Parade Square. It was the kickoff event of 10-day-long twin celebrations. It's really unforgettable event for me. But Honorable Prime Minister emphasized the importance of moving forward on the basis of the dream Bongo Bondu had about 50 years ago. So if you talk about moving forward in this particular context, I think first and foremost is we need to set energy policy master plan for the further growth and development of this country to meet the requirements of Vision 2041. I think this is the first and foremost importance. We shouldn't lose sight of this element when we discuss how we are going to formulate master plan and energy power policy for the future. And secondly, of course, yes, we need to address this acute and important area, which is climate change. So no doubt this government is really trying to focus on climate change perspective. Yes, this country is a very important member and chair of a climate vulnerable forum. So I think Honorable Prime Minister as well as Mr. Azad have been playing very, very important roles to that end. So this is, in a way, this was there when JICA cooperated with the previous master plans, but we should be more aware of this climate change element. So challenge here is to what extent we can go for renewables. I think the extent which we can go to renewable will really determine the course of energy mix for the future. So I think we should not really presuppose the ratio of energy sources before setting to this exercise of formulation. So first, we really need to try our best how far we can go in terms of increasing the dependency ratio on renewable. I think that's a very important aspect as well as a very important challenge, whereas we should be mindful that Bangladesh has been abiding by Paris Agreement. Bangladesh has been faithfully and steadily implementing its nationally determined commitment. So, but down the line, we need, all the countries need to revise their own nationally determined commitment respectively. So naturally, the exercise of formulation of master plan should be a good input for the revised national determined commitment. And also we need to address SDGs. Yes, climate change aspect I have already touched upon, but also this energy access, inclusiveness, that's goal 7 of SDGs. So that's another element in formulating policy and establishing master plan we should really address. So those 3 areas are very important when it comes to our joint exercise. Economic growth, realizing Vision 2041, and climate change, non-carbon renewable elements, that's number 2. And number 3 is inclusiveness and energy access. I think those are the very important elements with which we should move forward in formulating master plan and energy policy. I just want to say a few things about what the previous speaker said. One thing is excess capacity. This is a very, very important issue to address. And this is a national issue, I guess. But you have to be also aware of the fact that there is a lead time for planning and constructing power stations. So normally back in Japan, I think it takes 7 years, after starting planning to completing the work of construction of power stations. So I think this is something you should also take into consideration when you talk about future planning and a 5-year review of policy and so forth. And we will continue to cooperate with this government, not only through master plan formulation, but also cooperation for transmission and distribution system, which this government has been really putting a strong emphasis on, as well as capacity building and institutional building on renewable side. So JICA will do very comprehensive cooperation while focusing on this master plan formulation. I was very much encouraged to have good opportunities of discussing with my interlocutors here, particularly from early part of last year to the summer, July, August, when Japan decided to conduct a survey on Unit 3 and Unit 4 of coal-fired power plants in Matabali, which are of course very controversial plans. So, but in spite of difficulties, my government decided to do survey and research on Unit 3 and Unit 4, knowing that that is already integral part of power plant projects in Matabali. They have been doing Unit 1 and Unit 2, also knowing that strategic importance of Matabali project, both power stations and deep sea port construction. also the implication for the regional development of Matabali, also the connectivity. So those are the elements we really looked at when we sort of decided to start the survey on Unit 3 and Unit 4. But through this process, my government, my embassy, JICA had a thorough dialogue with respective interlocutors. But we could clearly see the change of the perception or mindset of those in the decision-making circle and officials in the ministries concerned. So, it was clear that they really need the needs to change the course of their policy. So also they really be mindful of the importance of energy transition. So I was very much encouraged by this transformation of policy and change of the perception, which were clearly seen and shown by those officials and decision makers of these countries. So, and this turned out to be the new policy direction to scrap at least plans to do new coal-fired power plants. So there used to be almost a dozen of plans to do new coal-fired plants on the island of Matamari, Maheshkari. But they decided to scrap those plans. So, and we changed our policy for coal-fired cooperation overseas. China also has changed its policy, how and when they are going to cooperate financially using public finance and so forth. So the change of the policy of this country, as well as the trend of international community, has been really affecting how we are going to cooperate, how we are going to cooperate power plants construction, as well as how we are going to cooperate this master plan and energy policy formulation. So I think we should really try to work out the best possible master plan in light of the needs of those very important factors I have already laid out. So sorry, I'm going to leave soon, but I spoke too long. But it's so nice to be part of this CPD dialogue. I look forward to further interactions with CPD on this important project and some other important issues and agenda of our mutual interest. Thank you very much for having me, and I wish you the continued success of this wonderful webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you so much for your very insightful comments, and thank you for mentioning that we need to contextualize our discussion in view of the Vision 2041 and also the Sustainable Development Goals. And those talk about not only economic growth, but also social inclusion and also environmental sustainability. So contextualizing in those terms is very important. Secondly, you have also mentioned about the importance of nationally determined commitment in line with Paris Climate Convention and the decision. And it's also very important, I think, that it should be nationally determined. And there, some of our panelists have mentioned about the voice of our own institutions and our own experts in the policy making. And we do hope that when this medium-term plan will be designed and formulated, where JICA will be a major partner, as we know, this voice is also given equal importance, because if it truly has to be a nationally determined commitment, then the policies should also be nationally determined and should be formulated in an inclusive way. And you have very rightly also mentioned that as part of the collaboration, there will be capacity building in the counterpart institutions and agencies in Bangladesh. At the same time, inclusion of experts' voice and people's opinion and citizens' accountability is also very important. So thank you, and we are very grateful for the support that Japan is extending in various aspects of Bangladesh's development. Thank you, Excellency, for being with us. I would now like to bring in the Director General of Power Cell, Mr. Mohammad Hussain. Thank you, Mr. Hussain, for being with us. You have heard about some of the concerns also, and also some of the challenges. So your views with regard to this plan and how you are planning to estimate the demands and the energy mix will be very important for our audience to hear. So over to you, Mr. Hussain.
Thank you, Professor Mustafiz. I have just heard His Excellency Ambassador of Japan, Mr. Rito Naoki. I have heard from my teacher, Professor Tamim, heard from Professor Anu Muhammad, and I've heard from Imran Karim of BIPA. It would have been nice if I could have heard from all of the panelists, and that would definitely help me a lot to formulate my responses. However, as I have a meeting at 12, I'm sorry that I have to break the sequence. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate Dr. Kundakar Ghulam Moazzam for this excellent presentation. Particularly, this is miracle that he has completed the 50 to 55 slides presentation within less than half an hour. This is really something to learn from him. And it was, in fact, he has covered almost all the aspects. The very outset, this, as you know, that this is the month of independence. Yesterday, we just celebrated the birth centenary of our father of the nation. So I would like to pay respect to our father of the nation and also these 3 million martyrs and 200,000 our mothers and sisters for their sacrifice for this independence. Special appreciation goes to CPD for this proactive, in fact, initiative. Normally, what we do, we do post-mortem when something happens, then we go for analysis, what are the lapses, limitations. And this is something exceptional that you have taken the predictive measures of what would be happen and what was happened in the past and how we can, in fact, intervene. So this is, in fact, it will help us in formulating this very comprehensive power and energy master plan, which we have already undertaken. In general, I have agreement to all the issues that Professor Moazzam has highlighted, except very one or two. Maybe these are also a matter of interpretation between the government and the stakeholders. See, if I go slide by slide, very briefly, I can say that yes, we have the very you can say the variation of our projection and achievement that is there, and that is because particularly in the aspect of demand and the generation. You know that as already Professor Tamim has also highlighted some issues regarding the demand forecast, and in your presentation it was very clearly identified that this linear relationship of GDP with this demand will not work here, as the increase of demand is in the service sector, which has not in fact taken that much growth as far as electricity demand is concerned. And again, also Professor Tamim said that we have in fact considered the industries. Again, the industries have not that confidence with the grid, so they have not come up. So 3,000 megawatt plus, in fact, is aside with these captive power plants. These are the two issues, and also we have some indigenous, you see, limitations that has also been highlighted by Imran Purim of BIPA, that you see we have to sometimes swap between the fuel because of the fact that we have limitations of the fuel ability. I mean the lack of sustainable fuel mix. So that's why we have to keep some surplus so that in case of scarcity of one fuel, we can switch to another fuel. In case of the price benefit of one fuel, we can easily swap to the another fuel. So these are the issues, in fact, we have considered in our plan. One thing Professor Modjem as well as Professor Pamin has highlighted that it should not be long one. I think His Excellency Ambassador, he has also indicated that we should have a vision, and this vision 2041. In fact, let me inform you that in our PESMP 2016, it should have been 2035. It was me, maybe I have done wrong, or my aspiration was that we have a vision 2041, so we should make our plan at least focusing this vision 2041. That's why it was targeted. But we reviewed 5 years interval. So I think that we almost, as I said, this is a matter of perception. Professor Tamil was telling you should have a short term, mid term, and the vision. So if we can consider this, the plan is something like, because after 5 years when we consider, we basically specify this 5 years distinct plan. Regarding the coal, I think Professor Anand Mohammed has talked a lot, though his statement was mostly political one. But one thing definitely I want to take into cognizance regarding the coal one, he is very right that we have not explored our domestic coal because of this land scarcity of our fertile land and the land food security. So that is we have done. But what we can do, we can stop generating power if we don't go for imported fuel. So I think that is also something reality we have to consider. Regarding the renewable, one thing I can't agree with Professor Modjem that we have made little effort on the renewable. In fact, our efforts are on, and we are giving utmost effort to the renewables. You see what we are doing, even other nations. We have started with, say, the solar home system to electrify our vulnerable group, underprivileged group. Then we have started with mini grid. Then now, considering our land scarcity, we have, you see, tried to export the innovative way, like rooftop solar, like the solar across along the river banks, along the rail stations. So these are we are trying, and it is still in our priority in the master plan or whatever we plan, 8-year plan. But we have to, you see that you have to appreciate our limitations in renewable. I don't know what, though he has not referred this study, that utilizing 1 point something of land, we can 100% go for renewable energy. I just want to put this question to him, also to the audience. You see, let us consider that we have the scope to go for renewables. Forget even about we will go for the smart grid, as Professor Kami was telling. So what will happen in the evening time, night time? Okay, maybe answer will come that battery will be. What is the cost of the battery? What is the, then now we are shouting for the carbon emission. Then what is the disposal of those millions, billions of batteries? So you see, these are the issues, this is the reality. We have to, while we talk, we have to keep in your mind that we have limitations, and accommodating those limitations, we have to go with those issues. I think as I already told that one thing regarding the distribution and transmission, Professor Modjem was telling this long due to the long transmission system. In fact, that is also the CBC. We have to consider a generation hub or generation plan, considering two aspects. One is the coal availability and coal transportation. Another is the transportability of the equipment itself. So you see, like for instance, if you consider a mega project in the northern belt of the country, is it possible? Definitely not, because that heavy equipments cannot be transported, fuel are not available, and this is very even now. Bada Prokriya coal power plant, we are now having shortage of coal. That's why it cannot generate up to the capacity. So this is the issues. Phasing out of the fossil fuel based power plants, I think this is not the time to, as already I have mentioned. Regarding the quick phase out of the quick rental, that is already it has been decided, and in fact we are not going for any rental power plant at the moment. With this reference, Professor Anu Mohammed was referring this special act for power and energy supply. You see, an act is there, but the question is when and where we apply it. We only apply this act when this is indispensable. And you see, I think you can hardly find any project where question is arising due to application of this act. So আমার মনে হয় যে আমরা প্রফেসর মজ্জামের যে ইয়েগুলো সুপারিশগুলো ছিল, আমি অলমোস্ট এটা বললাম যে সবগুলোর সাথে একমত পোষণ করি। শুধুমাত্র রিনিউয়েবলস এর ক্ষেত্রে এটা আমাদের প্রতি ইনজাস্টিস হবে আমরা যদি বলি যে আমরা এফোর্ট দিচ্ছি না, চেষ্টা করতেছি না। আমরা সর্বাত্মকভাবেই সেটা চেষ্টা করতেছি। আমি ওনার সাথে একমত, যেহেতু প্ল্যান করে বসে থাকলে হবে না, এটাকে মনিটরিং করতে হবে এবং যে ফুয়েলের ক্ষেত্রে আমরা অবশ্যই যে নবায়নযোগ্য জ্বালানি সেটার জন্য আমরা কাজ করে যাচ্ছি। অদক্ষ বিদ্যুৎ কেন্দ্র যেগুলো, যেটা প্রসাদ তামিমও বললো, সেগুলোকে কিন্তু কন্টিনিউয়াস রিটায়ারমেন্টে পাঠানো হচ্ছে। হ্যাঁ, আমরা যদি হয়তো আজকে যদি ডিপেন্ডেবল ক্যাপাসিটি নিয়ে কথা বলতাম, তাহলে হয়তো এই রিজার্ভ মার্জিনটা অত বড় দেখাতো না। বাট আমরা সবগুলো টার্মে যখন যেটা দত্তরা ইউজ করি, ইনস্টল ক্যাপাসিটির কথা বলি, আমরা ডিরেটেড কথা ছিল, আমরা ডিপেন্ডেবল ক্যাপাসিটির কথা বলি। আমার মনে হয় যে আমি মোটামুটি in a short span I have covered everything. One thing I can refer to the statement of Ambassador of Japan. Yeah, our aspiration is that we'll go for the zero carbon society. This is our, you can say, this is in our wish list. And but at the same time we have to achieve the vision 2041. আমরা সেটার জন্য কাজ করছি এবং আমি মনে করি যে আমাদের এই পলিসির উপর ভিত্তি করে কিন্তু আগামী যে পাওয়ার এবং এনার্জি মাস্টার প্ল্যানটা হবে। প্রফেসর আনু মোহাম্মদের একটা কথার সাথে আপনি একমত যে অবশ্যই আমাদের স্থানীয় বিশেষজ্ঞ যারা আছেন, জাইকার অর্থায়নে একটা হয়তো কনসাল্টিং টিম কাজ করবে, বাট আমি বিশ্বাস করি তারা সবার সাথে ইন্টারঅ্যাক্ট করবে। আমাদের যারা সত্যিকারের পাওয়ার এক্সপার্ট আছে, যারা টেকনিক্যাল ইনপুট দিতে পারবে, অবশ্যই তাদের সাথে শেয়ার করবে, তাদের ইয়ে নেবে, অ্যাডভাইস নেবে। আমি একটু এটা এনশিওর করবো, একটু আপনাদেরকে আশ্বস্ত করতে পারি। আমি পরিশেষে আবারও ধন্যবাদ জানাই এবং আমি শেষ পর্যন্ত না থাকতে পারে দুঃখ প্রকাশ করছি। আমি আবারও প্রফেসর মোয়াজ্জেমকে ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে আমার এই সংক্ষিপ্ত আলোচনা শেষ করছি। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
ধন্যবাদ জনাব মোহাম্মদ হোসেন আপনার মতামতের জন্য। আপনি সবসময় আমাদের দ্বারা অনুরোধ হলে আপনি আসার চেষ্টা করেন, আপনি ব্যস্ততার মধ্যেও আপনাকে আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ। এবং আপনি যে আমাদের আজকের প্রতিবেদনটির সাথে মোটামুটিভাবে একমত হলেন এবং ক্লারিফাই করলেন, সেজন্য ধন্যবাদ। বেশ কিছু পয়েন্ট। থ্যাংক ইউ মিস্টার মোহাম্মদ হোসেন ফর ইউর ফরওয়ার্ড লুকিং পার্সপেক্টিভস and also for supporting the almost all the recommendations that Dr. Moazzam has come up with. but you have also mentioned about governments and clarified about governments, plans in the near and medium term, and the zero carbon commitment of the government. Of course, the renewable, in the context of renewable energy, you have reiterated government's commitment to gradually move towards renewable sources. But as Professor Tamim mentioned, it will need a smart grid, and we will have to invest in those right from now. So sequencing remains a major concern here. And thank you for your statement with regard to including our experts in policy making. I think this is what Professor Anu Muhammad was also mentioning. Is very important, and we as citizens also we think that this is important. Thank you very much. I would now I will bring the JICA head with us, but now I will bring Dr. Ijaz Hussain, and then we will request the JICA head, because JICA was mentioned a number of times, and obviously they are partners in designing this, so his statement will also be very important. Ijaz, Dr. Ijaz, Professor Ijaz Hussain.
Hello. Yes, thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And Ijaz, if you could also focus on, because demand is emerging as demand estimation is emerging as a major issue. So if you could also kindly reflect on that as well, how to go forward with regard to having a good estimate about demand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafiz, and let me first congratulate Dr. Ghulam Muazzam for a very, very comprehensive sort of presentation. I was actually very impressed to see that, how busy each slides were, and 55 slides, and the work that CPD has done must be congratulated for this comprehensive work. I think that they have done half the work of the power system master plan, and I think that they could actually be given this work, and they could actually complete and give us a very good power system master plan. But then there are many technical issues and everything else that needs to be sorted out. Let me first begin with demand, because like Dr. Muazzam said, that their main focus was the demand side, and then they later incorporated the supply side. And I think that Professor Tamim has rightly highlighted some of the things that are needed to do a good demand projection. Now, problem with this consultant-driven, international consultant-driven work is that they come for a very limited amount of time. They do their work and go away. Now, it's clear that within this short period of time that they are working, it's impossible for them to understand all the nitty-gritty of demand in the country. So obviously, they will do a more top-down macroeconomic type modeling. And that kind of modeling, as we have seen, often relies on rather the true demand. It relies on government's ambition. So if the government tells JICA consultants when they're doing this work, look, we want to be a developed nation by 2041, and our per capita income will be this, and this is what we want. They can't do anything other than follow what diction the government has given. Now, if you want to model, let's say that the Bangladesh will become a developed country by 2041, and even if you use the very smallest per capita income that would be there in 2040 or 2041, and you use a sort of a energy intensity of the economy along with that, even if you use very low ones, you will arrive at a very large figure for 2040 40. Now, whether that is realistic or not, we never know. Okay, we'll never know. But that is the kind of planning that we have seen in the country, that government tells their aspirations, their plans to the foreign consultants, and they work out a model, and they're correct in what they've done, because if you want to do this, if you want to meet that, you need that. So there is nothing that you can do about it. Now, I have been sort of in the last 20, 30 years, I've been doing what is called a bottom-up energy sector planning in Bangladesh, but not for the energy division or energy sector or for the power sector. They have never asked me, they never consulted me, because they were really, as far as I'm concerned, never interested in getting into those nitty-gritties. Why did I do that? I did that because that was required for our national communication, our first national communication, second national communication, and NDC. So in that, the Department of Environment is involved in that, in doing this kind of planning. So we take every sector, subsector, and really go down to the device level. For example, how many fans there are, how many refrigerators there are. You really have to plan in that way. Now, let me give you an example how we make a mistake in when we say that, look, the demand will grow by so many percent per year. As we all know, Walton is doing very, very well in selling refrigerators. Okay, in the first few years, there was a huge sale of refrigerators. Now, as every economist would know, that at some point, very soon, it will saturate it. Let's say after, even if we assume that every rural household gets a refrigerator, after that, it will taper off. Now, if you don't understand those things, if you don't get those into your model, you will always make mistakes. And I don't want to say this, but do the power sector, does the power cell or the people who do the planning, do they have that kind of people, that kind of economists, that kind of people who understand how demand tapers off? What are the other factors which affect demand? Let me give you an example, like LPG. Right now, there are probably 30 LPG suppliers in the country, and they are all fighting each other and really killing each other. It's a mad situation in the LPG business. Why? You go back a few years, the total demand in Bangladesh was 100,000 ton per year. In a very short time, it shot up to 500,000, 800,000, now close to 1 million. Now, if you don't understand how or who is using LPG, you're going to say, in 10 years' time, the demand in Bangladesh will be 10 million tons. Now, I mean, from where? Who is going to use this? You've got to go deeper and understand these things. And what has happened is that everybody found LPG to be a very powerful, very profitable business, and 30 companies came into it, including PESMP, which has absolutely no business to come in to this business. They have come in only one and a half years back. Ridiculous. There are big companies which are not surviving, and they have come into, because somebody has told me LPG will become very big. But who is using LPG? This is the connected with the standard of living in rural households. As rural households become more prosperous, they will get LPG. And so initially there was a suppressed demand which was met, and then there is a regular demand increase, and really that's it. And now with the rural electrification, refrigerators will come in. So if you are not modeling, if you are not bringing these things into your understanding, you are going to make a mistake. And that's exactly what has happened. The LPG is now 1 million ton, and our study shows that even if we try very hard, everything, economy going well, by 2030, it cannot exceed 2.5 to 3 million ton. But there are JICA consultants have done a projection which shows this is 5 million ton in 2030. So if you are looking, if you are an investor, if you are a businessman, if you are looking at 30 million ton, 5 million ton in 2030, you're going to get into this business, and then something will happen. You will realize that this is an overcrowded business. We have done the same thing with banks, same thing with TV stations. There is something wrong in our understanding and planning that which creates all this overcapacity and over investment in areas. So let me come back to the power and the energy sector. We are making exactly the same kind of mistakes. We are going through this rote exercise of using a GDP growth which will continue into infinity, that we will have 8% growth till 20, and then we have a energy intensity of the economy using that kind of model and coming to a figure which has really very little meaning. And now let me come back to more specifics in the demand. Okay. So if you don't do a bottom-up demand and based on reality, you can get into this kind of problems of overcapacity, overinvestment. Your ambition, you can keep another curve, another line in your 3 scenario of high scenario where the ambition is there, but you must build what is called a business as usual or a baseline scenario which reflects exactly what is going on. I study these demands quite intently in Bangladesh. I don't know how many of you are aware that there are 2 components of electricity for the industry. One is captive, so if they get more gas, they generate their own electricity. The other is from the grid. So there is a portion, people who don't have a captive natural gas generation, they are reliant on the grid. So they have to use the grid electricity. Now, we expect and we talk about that Bangladesh is doing very well, Bangladesh economy is doing well, so much industrial growth and this, that. Look at the consumption of electricity from the grid. So all those industries which are connected to the grid should be growing. You look at it from 2017, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. There is very little growth. So how is industry growing? I mean, what energy are they using? Of course, people will say, oh no, the captive generation has gone up. Yes, but how much? You take that into account. We know there is a shortage of LNG. There is not that much of gas. Captive generation not supported to increase, but it has, because the government has doesn't actually follow all the things that they say and their plans. So you will see that the electricity demand by industries from the grid is flat. And you are economists and you have done the study and you know that industrial growth is not taking place. So 17, 18, 19, 20, this 21, 5 years, there has been maybe 1 or 2% growth. But if you do any other modeling, if you do based on what the government is saying, you will come up with a figure of at least 5%. So this is actually below the lower scenario. So how is that happening? So you must go into the economy. You must see exactly what is going on. You must be able. Now look, the reason Bangladesh has been able to show a lot of energy growth, especially in the electricity demand in the last 5 to 10 years, is because the government had a policy of rural electrification, 100% rural electric. There was a lot of suppressed demand there. So as you started giving electricity in the last 5 years, the suppressed demand got met. People bought refrigerators, people bought fans, and last year the electricity demand from the grid by the domestic or residential sector was 57%. Now that clearly shows this is not an industrial country. Okay, from the grid, the electricity demand cannot be 57. But think about it. that all this growth of electricity that we are seeing in the last 5 to 6 years is happening, and we are thinking that this economy is growing. But this is all not growth consumption. This is all happening in the residential sector. So anyway, that's not the important point. I don't want to get in. The thing is that a good modeling must bring this out. How can you bring this out if you're not studying these things? And who will study this? Is there one single body in the government which is doing this kind of study? Now let me go back about 30 years. Energy planning, energy forecasting, energy demand was a part and parcel of the government. Now, believe me, no one does it. It was part of the ERD. The Planning Commission used to do it. I remember there was Dr. Masood there who was responsible for that, and and they had done leap modeling. They tried to do other modeling. So there was always a body in Bangladesh which was responsible. Good or bad, it was there. But right now, it does not exist. There is not a single year. Now, I've tried to convince the government, please do it. If you can't do it, get some other organization, private organization can do it. BUET can do it. CPD can do it. CPD has grown from the report that I've seen. Dr. Ghulam Muazzam has done. They're capable of doing it. Give them the responsibility. Let there be government oversight. Get BUET and CPD, because we don't have economists, they don't have engineers, and you need a combination of economists and engineers, or energy economists, which don't exist really, and there's energy analysts who don't understand economics very well. So you need to get all these people together and do this modeling. If you do this modeling, if you understand what is going on in your economy, in the real nitty-gritty, then you will be able to do a good planning. And I'll finish by saying one last thing. Every country in the world, probably above a certain level, if you go to them and if you ask them that, let's say right now, this is what, 12:30, 12:40, if I ask you, ask that planning division of that energy planning, that can you tell me right now at 12:40, which are the devices in the country which is consuming what amount of energy? Okay, you will find, you open up in Japan, you will find a curve. The Japanese team which did the energy efficiency in Bangladesh, when they did the study, they're using hypothetical understanding, talking to us and all. They build a little graph which is there in the master plan for energy efficiency. But this graph is needed to understand your energy. For example, right now, fans are working, ACs are working, motors are working. So there are about 10 devices, lights are working. So you need a curve right now which will disaggregate. So right now at 12:40, we need in our country to understanding which device is consuming here. So if I ask anybody right now, there are, let's say, 5 million refrigerators in Bangladesh. If I ask somebody, how much electricity are refrigerators consume right now? How much electricity are air conditioners consuming? How much electricity fan? You look at Japan, you look at all developed countries, they have a curve for 24 hours which will tell you which device is consuming what kind of electricity. You need this kind of information. So I think that I'll finish with this by stating that we need lots and lots of studies. Otherwise, these documents will not have the desired results in terms of understanding what we want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ijaz. I think those were very insightful comments, and in the context of the discussion that we are having, these are very pertinent, very relevant, and very useful, and also for the policymakers. And you have mentioned the importance of disaggregated data and real-time data. I think this is very important not only for demand estimation, but also, as you very rightly mentioned, efficiency, estimating the efficiency of use of energy, which is also very important. Thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully you will be staying with us as well. I would now like to bring in head of JICA, Mr. Yehu Hayukaya, who is with us, and he has listened to some of the comments of the panelists also, not to speak of Dr. Muazzam's presentation. Some of our panelists have mentioned about inclusion of local expertise, and strengthening of local institutions as well. So I think that this is also something that we will have to think about. And we will then bring in Mr. Professor Shahriar Alam after him. So, Mr. Yehu Hawakawa, are you there?
Yes,
Please.
I am.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this dialogue. I appreciate very much about the great presentation of Dr. Moazem and the valuable comments by the panelists. As for the demand side projection, I agree on many issues, such as the importance of the following first approach, integrating energy and power, and the necessity to increase of use of renewable energy, and the approach to consider the whole system, including not only generation, but also the transmission and distribution, and the necessity of the bottom-up approach in projecting the demand, in addition to GDP-based projection method. And I also appreciate the very insightful comment by Mr. Imran Karim on how to think about the future use of captive power generation under Bangladesh's less favorable position in using renewable energy extensively due to the land scarcity and the possibility of power import generated by the hydropower plants in neighboring countries. And I also thank the great and very realistic comment by Professor Tamim on necessity of a more detailed assessment of industrial and residential demand for power, as well as on the needs of carefully analyze the difference between the simple total of the generation capacity and the generation capacity that is actually and effectively available at a certain point. I also would like to draw your attention to His Excellency Ambassador Ito's pointing out that the lead time to plan and construct power plants. I also would like to point out that the intensive use of the renewable energy will need additional facilities and infrastructure to absorb the changes of renewable power generation, as Mr. Mohammed Hossain already suggested. And another point I'd like to focus is the importance of demand side management. As Ambassador Ito already mentioned, JICA just agreed with the Power Division and the Energy Division to start the project to support the government in formulating integrated energy and power master plan. Actually, the key phrase in this project is 3E plus S, efficiency, environment, energy security, and safety. And the direction towards zero or low carbon society, fully recognizing achievement of the net zero emission needs it's a huge challenge. But this is a sort of the concept that we'd like to consider in our project. And as we all are recognizing, well, now we are in very difficult situation in predicting the long-term future. You may remember that the projection of this fiscal year's GDP growth rate by the government, ADB, IMF, and World Bank made in last October were quite various. So it's not easy for us to predict the 1 year future now. And in addition, one technological breakthrough, such as possible development of power storage or offshore wind power, might change the situation. And on the other hand, the construction of the data centers, for example, or introduction of the electric cars may increase the use of electricity. So we believe that we all need to collect the wisdom from a wide range of stakeholders in order to predict the future, with our best knowledge. And with these uncertainties, we also need to consider, of course, some scenario analysis and there may need to think about the multiple benchmark years, such as 2030, 2041, and 2050. There are two things that I also would like to emphasize is that first, we assist the government to formulate the plan. I mean, the government will decide the direction, and we are in a position to support it. That is one thing. And the second point I'd like to say is JICA welcomes wide discussions and contribution on this matter. We hope to deepen these dialogues in the course of our cooperation for the integrated master plans, and we will make our best efforts to assist to figure out the country's future of energy and power. So once again, thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayakawa, for your very candid views and for sharing the way that you want to go forward in terms of your collaboration with the government. And you have mentioned very important 4 points that what will guide the plan, which is efficiency, environment, energy security, and safety. I think these are very important. Your last point is quite, I think, important, and you have made it very consciously, which is that JICA will be, of course, helping the government in design of the plan. I think it is our government, our government's responsibility how it will generate the opinion of the people, and how it will reflect that in the overall guidance that it will give to the to JICA. As Mr. Hayakawa very rightly mentioned, the government will give the vision, the overall strategy. So in terms of that, I think the points that has been raised by some of our panelists, that we do have our experts, and today's panel discussion also showed the richness of the professionalism and expertise that we have in our own country. If this discussion was taking place in many other least developed countries and also developing countries, I don't think that the discourse would have been that much powerful and that much informative, that much analytically and evidence driven. So I think that this is an asset which our government will have to decide how it will make best use of it. So let us also urge our involved policymakers and institutions that they have a responsibility of this as part of not only accountability and transparency, but also as part of designing a policy which reflects the real economy. And then we will make less mistake. And that will be good for our country. So thank you very much, Mr. Hayakawa. I would now like to bring in Professor Mohammad Shahriar Ahmed, and if Professor Dr. M. Samsul Alam is there, we will finish with him this panel discussion. But we also have in our amongst our audience a number of very important players in energy discussion and energy discourse in our country. So I will also give them an opportunity to share their views as well. But at this point, I would like to request Professor Chaudhry Mohammad Shahriar Ahmed, Assistant Professor and Director, Center for Energy Research, CER. Are you there, Professor?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor Mustafiz. And thank you, Dr. Mojem, for the nice presentation. Very big and very elaborate, but within very short time. So I will highlight only some of the things some of the previous speakers has already mentioned. And when we are comparing the spinning reserve, we should compare with the derated or dependable capacity, not with the install capacity that will mislead us. In fact, when needed, we cannot get the expected amount of generation capacity when we are talking about the install capacity. and for many reasons, the installed capacity cannot provide that amount of things. And another things we should consider, some of the power plants in in Bangladesh power sector are running is a very low capacity factor, especially the liquid fuel based. So the power system, next power system master plan should highlight those things. How can we phase out the liquid power plant, especially if we consider that Bangladesh has now 1330 megawatt of diesel power plant, which are running as a capacity utilization factor of only 1.2%. And to provide the capacity payment, the per unit cost, average cost of those liquid fuel based diesel based power plants are 176 BDT per unit, and these data are taken from annual report of BPDB. And also we have 5,600 megawatt of HFO based power plants, which are running as a capacity factor of 18%. And very recently I have drafted the National Solar Energy Roadmap, and in that roadmap up to 2041, we have mentioned three scenarios. One is the business as usual case, another is the mid deployment case scenario, and another is the high deployment case scenario. The best case is based on the power system master plan that said that by the year 2041, our renewable energy should be 10% of the total energy mix. And if we consider that according to the power system master plan in the year 2041, our total demand will be something like 60,000 megawatt, and out of this 6,000 megawatt should come from renewable energy. But in the renewable energy roadmap, we have suggested in high case scenario that 30,000 megawatt should come from solar energy, and especially we have highlighted the solar energy because among all the renewable energy sources that we have, so far solar is the most proven technology. And if we want to increase the renewable energy share, then we can consider the renewable energy import from the neighboring countries. Say for example, from Nepal or from Bhutan or from Myanmar, they have lot of hydropower potential. We can bring renewable power there. And also in India, the cost of solar energy is much less than Bangladesh. We can also think of that. And I'm also agreed that if we want to increase the renewable energy share, especially the solar, land is not that much scarce, because if you consider that Bangladesh government has approved the Bangladesh Delta Plan back in 2018, and in the Delta Plan there is around 4,000 square kilometer of land reclamation plan of government from the year 2025 to 2035, and it is not mentioned that what exactly government will do with this reclaimed land, but it is mentioned in the plan that this reclaimed land should be used for industrialization or for for urbanization, for other purposes. But some of the portion, so I have mentioned in the roadmap that if only 4% of that land can be allocated for solar power hub development, what India did in their policy, that India is providing land and also they're developing the transmission infrastructure, and we found that they could manage to bring down the tariff of the solar power less than or around 3 cents per unit. So if we can, the government can facilitate these things, then solar we can bring a significant portion from solar. And another important thing is that among all the renewable energies, we have solar and wind. These two are our two potential renewable energy sources, but these two are intermittent or variable in nature. So it is very difficult to think right at this moment how to inject a large portion of variable renewable energy into the national grid. And Professor Tamim has rightly mentioned that a smart grid must be there, and also we need to consider about the storage systems, because to shift the power from daytime to nighttime, it is very important when variable renewable energy will increase into the power mix, and that can be I think not that difficult in the coming days. And if we consider the cost reduction potential of solar and also the large scale battery systems, then by the year 2025, according to National Renewable Energy Laboratory research, that the storage price, what lithium ion based storage price, right at this moment, what is around 350 USD per kilowatt hour will reduce to around 100 US dollar per kilowatt hour. So that will drastically reduce one. And very recently, we are developing a solar PV project, designing in Monpur Island to electrify the Monpur Island under Ojo particle distribution network. And we found that with the lithium iron phosphate battery systems and with solar, so if we provide electricity to the island completely with renewable energy, 100% renewable energy, and with storage system with 24 hours, the cost is something like in Bangladeshi Taka, it becomes around 24 to 25 Taka. And we are expecting that this cost will go down further. And by the year 2025, this cost may be come to around 17 to 18 Taka, and which is very much comparable with the liquid fuel based power plant. So we can consider the variable renewable energy along with the storage. And definitely, if we consider to increase the renewable energy share, especially the variable renewable energy share, then we need to provide the sufficient spinning reserve capacity. Otherwise, say for example, if we have successive 3-4 days, rainy days or foggy days, then we are not going to get sufficient energy from renewable. That's why we need to provide the spinning reserve as well. So these are the things we need to calculate and we need to study very rigorously before formulating the power system master plan. And I think it is the very right time, I mean, to include expert from all tiers, to develop a very good future power system master plan for Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you for those very important points, and also for reminding us about the issue of capacity utilization, and your two examples with regard to use of 1.2%, and then in another case it was 18% only. So I think this is something that we should look at, because this obviously raises the cost, as you have very rightly mentioned. And you have also mentioned about the renewable energy prospects, and you have shared with us the optimism that if we can expand it, the economies of scale will take hold and the prices could be brought down as well. And thank you for reminding us about the Delta plan. We are also very inquisitive about learning how this will be done, the 5,000 kilometers of reclaimed land and how it can be used. So thank you for drawing our attention to that as well. Do we have Professor Dr. Samsul Alam with us? Samsul Alam Bhai, are you with us? Okay. Okay, thank you. Our guest of honor is also with us, Additional Secretary Mr. Muhammad Alauddin. He has been very patiently listening to all of our panelists. And if you can be with us for another 10 minutes, Mr. Guest of honor, I can take 10 minutes for interventions from the floor. If you are okay with that, because I don't want to tax on your time, but if you are agreeable, then okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that's the attitude that we really appreciate, that the government officials, high-level officials are interested to hear what the stakeholders are telling us. So we have a number of them, but I will give them just 1.5 minutes to make a very concrete presentation. We have from the floor, we saw that Mr. Shah Mohammad Hilal Bhai has mentioned that he would like to intervene, and Ms. Mushaida Sultana, we unfortunately, she will be the first female participant who will be taking part in the discussion today. We do need to have more female participation because they bring a distinct perspective into the discourse. So Mushaida, I will bring you, but first Hilal, Mr. Hilal. Hilal bhai, are you there? Hilal achen? Mushaida, are you there with us? Miss Mushaida Sultana? Mushaida nahi? Mushaida nahi? Oh, acha. So, okay. Mr. Simon Nicholas, are you?
I'm here.
Oh.
This is Moshaida. Yes, sorry. I took time to unmute
no
my
problem. Okay,
mic.
yes. Please, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, I'll go very quickly.
Yes.
I just have 2 points to add here. When I was listening to these conversations and the dialogue here, I realized that Professor Tanim has pointed out one thing, that we have to make a short-term plan and the middle term plan, and he is very he wants to see that 2041 vision as like a vision. So what I wanted to point out here, that we have already lost an opportunity to go for renewable by building coal and nuclear power plants. And the reason I'm saying is that if you look at the case of Germany has a plan to go for solar, but because of their already built coal and nuclear, they're not able to take a drastic step right now. Besides, they have to spend a huge amount of money for subsidies. So what happens is that once this energy system is something which takes a long-term effort. And this is called technological locking. For example, for India and Germany, it is very difficult now to come out of coal because there are lots of employment opportunities already created, which is based on coal power plants. So and also the coal mining. So for them, it is like a question of social justice right now. So it is very important to look at the social scientists also, that what they are talking about and how different countries are actually making their plans. And from there we can learn. And it is important to make a long-term plan, especially because not only because of this locking, technological locking, but also the infrastructure and the social, the habits people grow, the individual behaviors people actually grow. When they become dependent on a particular type of consumption, it is very difficult to, keep them away from that. We have already experienced something in case of LPG, that when LPG was introduced, people were not very much interested in LPG in the beginning. That is because of the gas pipeline that they were using. And if you look at in the rural areas, there are like situations where if the people do not have refrigerators, they become more dependent on the LPG gas, because they have to cook more times, so it costs them more energy. So there are lots of things that we need to understand to make a plan, and for that I recommend that in any kind of plan that we make, there is a need to appoint or to have like participants like social scientists, economists, and all types of people, because what I see from other countries' experience, they have always included different kinds of people. It is not about mathematical calculation. For example, I give an example from JICA's PESMP 2016. There I use that, they have seen that they use this 3E model, which determine the energy mix scenario, which is based on calculation. It's a mathematical modeling that says how we optimize the energy, environment, and economic issues. But there are also social and political aspects with it, which needs to be considered. And for that, in a team, we need different kinds of people to participate in this planning process. So Another thing that we can observe is now the government people are always saying that there are solar home systems that are being built, and so as if solar home system is the main solution. But if you look at the way that grid expansion is taking place, especially because of the nuclear, it is actually conflicting, because when in the rural areas the grid will go, the grid will reach, you will see that. Like people will no longer be interested in the solar home system, which will become more costly. So we need to think about all these things and include like social scientists and also the people who are like have political views, and how a particular plan could be politically feasible. It must be also taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshayda. I think that's a very important point. We should not be held captive to models, and it should be designed in a participatory way, where social scientists obviously are key players. It's just not estimation and math modeling. Thank you very much, and also for other points. Mr. Helal, are you there? Could you please unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. In 1.5 minutes, please. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum, sir, and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us. And I could not join continuously, so I am not fully aware of the delivery of this meeting, but I was present in the first part. I enjoyed the presentation from Dr. Kandakar Mohsen. It was very interesting.
If you could make any concrete point, please, in brief.
I did not make any concrete point at this stage because, as I said, that I could not follow the discussion in toto because I have some other engagements, so I have to leave for some time, and I rejoined again. And I will request Dr. Ghulam Muazzam to send me the presentation email, so I'll check it. This is first thing. And second thing is that we have signed the document, the records of discussion and relevant documents on 14th March. Being the focal person from the Ministry of Power, I am very much interested to be engaged with the civil society academia. So, as a focal person, I am giving my assurance to bring you on board during the preparation stage.
Thank you.
It is obvious that we will not be in a position to accommodate all of your suggestions, all of your guidelines in the preparation process, but definitely we will look into the suggestions and issues that are really possible, that are really needed, that are accommodatable.
Thank you.
With these assurances, please allow me to stop. I am attending another meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Helal.
I will be looking forward to take you on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Helal, for your support and for your openness to the ideas and suggestions and comments, and some of which are critical comments. But I think that together we can make a difference, and we can design an appropriate policy which will serve the future developmental needs of our country. So,
what I can assure you that the way we have designed the terms of reference and scope of the upcoming PESMP is substantially different from the previous ones.
Very good.
So, I see some improvements.
Very good. I think because this point has been raised a number of times by some of our panelists, that it has to be inclusive, and Professor Anu Muhammad has emphasized it very strongly, and Mushaida also in her intervention has mentioned about the need for multi-stakeholder participation for coming up with a policy which will which will be more tuned to the ground realities rather than just the aspirations. So thank you very much. Is Miss Zarifa of BPDB here? Miss Zarifa, are you there? No. Is there anyone else who would like to make a very quick comment? No. Is there anyone who would like to make any quick intervention? Okay. Okay. Mr. Marzan Noor.
Thank you very much, sir. Sorry, I'm turning off my video because of my low bandwidth.
Okay.
So I won't take more than 1.5 minutes. And thank you very much for inviting me to attend this dialogue. And Dr. Morgan for such informative presentation, which will contribute to the PSMP revision. And the discussion was really useful and timely as Bangladesh is in the process of updating the power sector master plan. And it was really great to hear of all from the distinguished panelists. As I'm participating from the British High Commission Dhaka, you may know that UK is hosting the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP26, and energy transition is one of the major focus of the UK COP presidency. And we're working with government and non-government actors across the world to facilitate and establish strong collaboration among the relevant stakeholders to make this transition effective. And I think most of you joined the recent ETC Bangladesh dialogue on 15th of March. We have received huge interest from both government and non-government participation on knowledge transfer, technology, private sector investment in this issue, which is a positive indication for Bangladesh. This is also important from the climate perspective, as Bangladesh is currently updating the nationally determined contribution like NDC, and being the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, Bangladesh is developing the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. And there should be a strong coherency between these important documents and the revised power sector master plan to reduce the emission and promote cleaner sources of energy. And having said that, I want to thank the organizer for hosting this event, and the discussions were really great, and I'm looking forward to follow up the discussions in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Noor, and thank you for drawing our attention to climate perspective as well in the context of the discussion on energy plan. I think the leveraging and synergies between these two are quite obvious and evident. And thank you also for sharing your plans. So thank you, audience. We had very interesting discussion, and I think that our discussion is just not academic. At CPD, we always try to organize this type of discussion ahead of important documents, ahead of budget, ahead of 5-year plans, and this is also one of those where we would like to have a forward-looking discussion on an important issue of national importance. So I think this has been successful from that perspective, and I would like to register our deep appreciation to all the panelists, and obviously Dr. Muazzam has done a stellar job on behalf of his team. Thank you, and we now have the remarks from our guest of honor, Mr. Mohammad Alauddin, Additional Secretary, Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, SREDA, Power Division. He is an important player, and he has been very kind to be with us and listen to what our distinguished speakers have been sharing their opinion about on a very important issue. And Mr. Alauddin, as Additional Secretary and Chairman of SREDA, obviously is a very important key player in the energy area and energy design of energy plans. So his points and his reactions to some of the comments that have been made will be very important. So over to you, Mr. Alauddin.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafizur Rahman. Let me convey my gratitude to CPD for inviting me to this dialogue at a time when government is planning to revise and formulate PSMP, which also coincides with our golden jubilee of independence and Mujib Borsho. So I must appreciate Dr. Moazem and his team for the comprehensive presentation. Dr. Moazem also tried to touch on all the aspects of upcoming PSMP, or he also analyzed the previous PSMPs from energy forecasting to even methodologies. And the most important thing is he put forward some important recommendations, which I believe the planners will take into account while framing the upcoming PSMP. And also I have learned a lot from the distinguished panelists, starting from the BPA representative, Mr. Imran Karim. So the point that I have taken from his speech is that when private sector and public sector works together, there is a to compare the efficiency. So we must learn from private sector's efficiency, those who are working in the public sector. We must not leave efficiency only on the private sector, and the public sector will remain as usual. That should not be. So this is one of the learning points. And second, Professor Tamim, he also made an important point regarding the integration of renewable or regarding fuel mix. Of course, government has wish list, the civil society has the wish list. So I believe truth lies in the middle. We should be somewhere which is doable in terms of fuel mix. And I picked one important point from Professor Anu Mahamad's deliberation, that is, I fully endorse his view that our capacity of institution must be enhanced, or capacity development should be given due importance, especially in terms of renewable energy. And most of my points has been touched upon by our Director General Power Cell, Mr. Mahmoud Hussain. I also endorse Mr. Hussain's view on part of the government, and Professor Ijaz also make an important point. Of course, for any planning, we are in need of the data and information, which is basically not that much available. And also, of course, doing a master plan in the context of up to 2041, it is basically a daunting task. So, of course, economists and engineers or technical experts should work together, nothing to be disagreed with. And we have also listened to Shahriar with reference from Delta Plan. He also showed us an area where we need to look at the reclaimed land, how best we can utilize this reclaimed land in terms of expansion of renewable energy. Our two participants, Moshaida Sultana, she also raised some issues. Of course, Solar Home System Bangladesh did a very good job in terms of providing access to electricity in rural Bangladesh outside the network of grid. But still, we are not saying that this is the permanent solution. As the socio-economic condition changes. By Solar Home System, we did basically provide the minimum, fulfill the minimum energy needs in the remote areas. And also I must thank Dr. Halal for giving assurance that they will take into account the recommendation that has been put forward in this forum. So my specific comment is on one thing. A point has been raised that we should prepare a plan for 5-year or short-term, mid-term. I think this is no conflict in preparing a plan for 5 years in the context of 2041. That should be in the context. Our local should be 2041, but our focus should be immediate 5 year. That should be kind of thinking from my side. So in the context of 2041, we can prepare a 5-year document for PSMP. And one important thing is, as Dr. Mozum has rightly analyzed that in the PSMP 2010, you will see in the first page, you will see a figure wherein it is stated that the vision of PSMP 2010 was, you see 4 circles. In the middle is poverty reduction, and the outer circle you see environmental protection, energy security, and economic growth. Unfortunately, in the body, you will have no directive as to how you will attain the environmental protection. So far, my knowledge goes, we have only 2 devices to ensure and to protect the environment. One is renewable energy, and another is energy efficiency and conservation. But when you analyze the document, in the body of the PSMP, you will not get that much directives there. And also likewise, once you take a look at the PSMP 2016, you will again see one of the pillars of this PSMP 2016 is maximization of green energy promotion and its introduction. But in the body of the document, really we miss a detailed direction as to how we will achieve the maximization of renewable energy. I believe while framing the upcoming PSMP, we will see the directives as to how we will attain the maximum renewable energy. And of course, I must endorse our Professor Shahriar's comment. We have not many scopes, but because the advantage of the current scenario is this: over the last 10 years, price of renewable energy has fallen. Let's say for solar power, price has fallen by 82%, according to International Renewable Energy Agency, and price of onshore wind 39%, and price of offshore wind 29%. So this figure has given by the International Renewable Energy Agency in Abu Dhabi. So another important thing is, of course, for escalation of renewable energy to share the proportion of renewable energy in the energy mix, we must not only rely on the existing source, let's say solar. Solely relying on solar, it is not possible. So we have to explore the new areas, let's say our marine energy renewable sources, what we call the ocean energy, our offshore wind. We have long, more than 700 kilometer coastal bed. So as to how we can utilize this also for increasing the share of renewable in the energy mix. Another important thing is, again, it is not possible without giving due importance on the import of energy. You see, in Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar has plenty of hydropower. I can cite one specific example. Our neighboring country, Myanmar, has 40,000 megawatt of hydropower. If we can import a portion of that, that will also help in increasing the share of renewable energy in our energy mix. Another important thing is how, to what extent we can go for renewable. I believe 10% is also good for the time being. Of course, it depends on the development of technology. Once technology improves, higher share can be achieved. Another important thing is the grid. Without any grid study, up to 10%, as experts say, we can feed into the grid. For higher portion, of course, we must rely on the storage devices. For your information, over the last 10 years, price of storage devices has fallen up to 75%. But still, it is questionable whether as to whether we can afford it or not. But we must continue our efforts for this, for our increase of renewable in the energy mix, and we must take advantage of the technology development, price fall down. So these are some of the aspects we can take a look into while preparing the upcoming PSMP. And of course, as an employee of Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority, we also see that there are elaborate details in the body of the PSMP as to how we will maximize the use of renewable. So with this, thank you so much again for inviting me and giving me opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Alauddin, our guest of honor. And thank you so much for being with us this morning, listening to our very insightful discussion, I would say, and hopefully it will help you also in the design of the strategy that you are planning to undertake. And thank you also for your comments that you have found the recommendations in our paper presented by Dr. Muazzam helpful, and also the comments of the panelists. And I appreciate that you have looked at the comments from a positive perspective. And also you have mentioned about some of the plans that the government is undertaking with regard to solar power. Yes, the costs are coming down, and also it depends on the economies of scale. If we have more beneficiaries, more production, prices will come down. But perhaps in the beginning we'll have to give support and incentives for its take up by the beneficiaries at an affordable and accessible rate. So thank you so much. Dear audience, we have had a very long discussion, but I think it was very helpful. I would like to register my deep appreciation to our chief guest, our two guests of honor, and the panelists who have brought very important perspectives on the discussion that we are having, and also the comments from the floor. We are very grateful for that as well. This program was live streamed, and we could reach 1,645 people, and it was viewed 515 times. So all of those who have joined us also thank you very much. আমাদের খুবই সুন্দর একটি আলোচনা হলো, এবং যেটা আমরা প্রথমে বলেছিলাম যে সিপিডির পক্ষ থেকে আজকের এই আলোচনাটা সংগঠিত করার একটা প্রধান উদ্দেশ্য ছিল যে আমরা দেখছি যে পাওয়ার সিস্টেম মাস্টার প্ল্যান এখন ডিজাইন হবে, এবং এই প্ল্যানের মাধ্যমে আগামীতে আমাদের এনার্জি সেক্টরের যে কৌশল, সেই কৌশল নির্ধারিত হবে, এবং সেখানে একটা নীতি ডিরেকশন আমরা পেতে পারবো। সেদিক থেকে আজকে বেশ কিছু পয়েন্টস উঠে এসেছে ডক্টর মুয়াজ্জেমের যে প্রতিবেদন সেটা থেকেও, এবং আমাদের প্যানেলিস্ট এবং ফ্লোর এবং আমাদের গেস্টরাও যেটা বললেন। একটা যেটা খুবই গুরুত্বের সাথে আলোচনা হয়েছে সেটা হলো যে আমাদের এই প্ল্যানটা করতে গেলে আমাদের চাহিদার যে প্রক্ষেপণ সেটা আমাদেরকে সঠিকভাবে করতে হবে। সেইটা করতে গেলে কিন্তু আমাদের একেবারে গ্রাসরুট পর্যায়ে, তৃণমূল পর্যায়ে আমাদের তথ্য উপাত্ত দরকার হবে। কেবলমাত্র জিডিপির এক রৈখিক যে প্রাক্কলন কী সেটার উপরে ভিত্তি করে, বা জিডিপির স্থিতিস্থাপকতা এনার্জির সাথে কি সেটার সাথে ঠিক করলে এটা হবে না। আমাদের জিডিপির কম্পোজিশন কি সেটা আমাদের বিবেচনায় নিতে হবে। আমাদের শহরায়ন কিভাবে হচ্ছে, আরবানাইজেশন কিভাবে হচ্ছে সেটা আমাদের চিন্তায় নিতে হবে। আমাদের শিল্পখাত কিভাবে অগ্রসর হচ্ছে, কারণ তারাই হবে হলো এই নতুন যে চাহিদা সৃষ্টি হচ্ছে সেটার মূল অনুঘটক। সুতরাং সেদিক থেকে যে চাহিদার প্রাক্কলন এটা খুবই আমাদেরকে স্মার্টলি করতে হবে, এবং এখানে এক্সপার্টরাও থাকবেন। এখানে কেবলমাত্র যারা নাকি মডেলিং করবেন তারা না, সোশ্যাল সায়েন্টিস্ট যারা আছেন, সামাজিক বিজ্ঞানী, তাদেরকেও অন্তর্ভুক্ত করতে হবে, এটা আমাদের প্যানেলিস্টরাও বলেছেন। দ্বিতীয়ত সেটা হলো যে আমাদের নিজস্ব সক্ষমতা। অবশ্যই আমাদের বৈদেশিক যারা আমাদের পার্টনার আছেন তারা আমাদেরকে সহায়তা করবেন, কিন্তু আমাদের দেশেও এই এনার্জি সেক্টরে, পাওয়ার সেক্টরে কিন্তু আমাদের নিজস্ব অনেক বিশেষজ্ঞরা আছেন, অনেক বাংলাদেশিরা আছেন যারা দেশের বাইরে আছেন। তাদেরকেও যদি সম্পৃক্ত করে আমরা যদি করি তাহলে এটা একটা যুগোপযোগী হবে, প্রয়োজন অনুযায়ী হবে এবং বাস্তবানুগ হবে। সুতরাং সেইটাও খুব শক্তিশালীভাবে এটা আমাদের এখানে এই আলোচনায় কিন্তু বেরিয়ে এসেছে। এবং সেখানেই যে এটার কিন্তু মূল দায়িত্ব আমাদের যারা বৈদেশিক যে পার্টনার আছেন তারা না, এটার দায়িত্ব কিন্তু আমাদের সরকার, যিনি নাকি যারা নাকি এটাকে দিক নির্দেশনা দেবেন এবং এটাকে প্রণয়ন করবেন। সুতরাং সরকারের উপরেই কিন্তু সেখানে আমাদের যারা আলোচনা করেছেন তারা বলেছেন যে সরকারকে এটা নিশ্চিত করতে হবে। তৃতীয় সেটা হলো যে আমাদের বিভিন্ন যে প্রতিষ্ঠান আছে, আমাদের যে বাপেক্স থেকে শুরু করে আমাদের অন্যান্য যেসব প্রতিষ্ঠান এগুলোর সাথে জড়িত, বিপিসি থেকে অন্যরা, সেখানে আমাদের সক্ষমতা বৃদ্ধি করে আমরা কিভাবে আমাদের নিজস্ব উত্তোলন করতে পারি, আমাদের নিজস্ব এক্সপার্ট যারা আছে তাদেরকে আমরা গড়ে তুলতে পারি এবং বিদেশ নির্ভরতা থেকে স্বদেশ নির্ভরতায় আমরা যেতে পারি, এটার উপরে আমাদের আলোচকরা গুরুত্ব দিয়েছেন। এবং সেখানে যে বিনিয়োগ দরকার, সেখানে যে একটা অবহেলাও অনেক সময় আমরা দেখি, সেটা নিরসন করার জন্য তারা বলেছেন। তারা এনার্জি প্ল্যান ডিজাইনের ক্ষেত্রে এনার্জি যে মূল্য সেটার কথা বলেছেন এবং এই মূল্যটাকে মানুষের জনগণের যাতে আমরা তাদের মধ্যে আমরা সাশ্রয়ীভাবে দিতে পারি, সেটার জন্য তারা বলেছেন যে আমরা কি এনার্জি মিক্স হবে, কি এক্সপ্লোরেশন হবে, কি ক্যাপাসিটি ইউটিলাইজেশন হবে, এগুলো সব কিছুই আমাদেরকে বিবেচনার মধ্যে নিতে হবে। কারণ আমাদের শেষের বিচারে আমাদের উদ্যোক্তারা, আমাদের ভোক্তারা, তাদের স্বার্থটাই কিন্তু বড় হওয়া উচিত। এখানে ব্যবসা স্বার্থ থেকে জাতীয় স্বার্থ, ভোক্তা স্বার্থ, উৎপাদক স্বার্থ, উন্নয়নের স্বার্থ, এটাকেই আমাদেরকে অগ্রাধিকার দিতে হবে এবং সেখান থেকেই আমাদের জবাবদিহিতা, স্বচ্ছতা, সেটাকেও আমাদের গুরুত্ব দেওয়ার কথা তারা বলেছেন। আমাদের আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে আমাদের রিজিওনাল বা আমাদের আঞ্চলিক সহযোগিতার বিষয়টিও এসেছে এবং সেইখানেও যে ধরনের অপরচুনিটিগুলো আছে সেটা সম্বন্ধেও আলোচনা করা হয়েছে। এবং শেষের বিচারে সেটা হলো যে আমাদের যে সামনের দিকে অগ্রসর হতে হলে আমাদের অবশ্যই ভিশন 2041 আমাদেরকে দিক নির্দেশনা দেবে, কিন্তু 5 থেকে 10 বছর একটা বাস্তবায়ন এবং অর্থনীতির চাহিদার উপর নির্ভর করে একটি নীতিমালা প্রণয়ন, এটাকেই আমাদেরকে অগ্রাধিকার দিতে হবে এবং সেটা করতে গেলে সবার সাথে আলাপ আলোচনা ভিত্তিতে, বিশেষজ্ঞদের সাথে আলাপ আলোচনার ভিত্তিতে এটা করলে আমরা একটা ভালো একটা ডকুমেন্ট পাবো, যেটা আমাদের উন্নয়নের দিক থেকে আমাদেরকে সেটা সহায়ক হবে এবং আমাদের যে ঈপ্সিত যে আমাদের যে যাত্রাপথ, যেটা অর্থনৈতিকভাবে সমৃদ্ধ, সামাজিকভাবে অন্তর্ভুক্তিমূলক এবং পরিবেশ বান্ধব যে আমাদের বাংলাদেশের ভবিষ্যতের কথা আমরা দেখি, সেটার সাথে সমান্তরালভাবে এবং সেটার সাথে সামঞ্জস্যপূর্ণভাবে একটা এনার্জি সেক্টরও আমরা গড়ে তুলতে পারবো, এই প্রত্যাশাই কিন্তু আমাদের আজকের আলোচনা থেকে উঠে এসেছে। আপনাদের সবাইকে আরেকবার ধন্যবাদ আমাদের সাথে থাকার জন্য, সিপিডিকে সমর্থন দেওয়ার জন্য, এবং আমাদের একটি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ ডকুমেন্ট আসছে, সেটাতে আপনারা যে অবদান রাখলেন আজকে উপস্থিত থেকে, মন্তব্য করে, শুনে, নিজেদের অভিজ্ঞতা বিনিময় করে, সেই জন্য সিপিডির পক্ষ থেকে, ডক্টর মোয়াজ্জেমের পক্ষ থেকে, আমাদের এক্সিকিউটিভ ডাইরেক্টর ডক্টর ফাহমিদা খাতুনের পক্ষ থেকে এবং ডক্টর মোয়াজ্জেমের যে টিম, তাদের সবার পক্ষ থেকে আপনাদেরকে আন্তরিক ধন্যবাদ ও কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাচ্ছি। ভালো থাকবেন, সুস্থ থাকবেন।